Chapter 787. The surrounding police officers completely cleared the main road, giving the helicopter a temporary landing place. An armed aircraft painted with the country's military logo landed quickly in the roar. When the hatch opened, a burly man in orange and yellow was the first to appear in everyone's eyes. The prisoner's hands were still handcuffed, and behind him, 2 soldiers surrounded him on both sides. "Go down! Hurry up!" the soldier shouted. The prisoner looked at the surrounding scenery, took a deep breath, and walked down under the soldier's urging. On the road ahead, there was already another man in prison clothes. He knew that the guy who came one step earlier was called Moria. Like him, Moria was a senior cadre of the former Imperial Capital Command. Later, he went solo and conquered a large territory. However, he was captured in the UPP crackdown a few years ago. "Haha, crocodile, old man, we meet again." Moria belonged to the type who liked to laugh. His lips were darker than the average person, an unhealthy black-purple color, and he had 2 black eyes. "You're not dead yet." Crocodile raised his eyebrows, apparently not seeing the excitement of his old friend. Moria didn't care much, just looked at Crocodile curiously. From the moment this guy appeared, he had a cigar in his mouth. After all, they were old friends for many years. Crocodile shrugged at this time and said, "I asked them for it. If they don't give it to me, I won't come. If they use force, I bite my tongue. They have no choice but to meet my requirements." Moria subconsciously looked at the escort soldier behind Crocodile and saw the other party's expression at the moment. "Do you know what happened?" Moria asked at this time. Crocodile said casually, "I heard something. Roger is inside. That guy won't die so easily. I used to know that this guy was crazy. Now it seems that he is simply a psychopath. But I like it." "Who allowed you to talk? Behave yourself." A man who looked like a senior police officer frowned and yelled. Crocodile and Moria turned their heads at the same time to look at the guy who spoke, showing a kind look, and said in unison, "Oh? Are you talking to me?" For some reason, the police officer was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. At this time, the sound of helicopters sounded again, and 2 more helicopters flew over from different directions at the same time. Actually, living in prison is pretty good. The food is good, the entertainment is good, there are female prison guards to play with, and I don't have to worry about being assassinated by my enemies. Why do you want me out?" A short man with a brandy nose grumbled as he was pushed down unwillingly. He was an extremely serious criminal, Bucky. On the other side, a tall man with dyed blonde hair and a strange smile on his face was also escorted down. Extreme felon. Doflamingo. The 4 of them had been escorted from different prisons and gathered in this place. It was unknown how many people had been used to capture these 4 criminals, but now they had no choice but to release these fellows. This caused many people who hated them to be enraged. Now the scene was completely under the command of the Minister of National Security. As for His Excellency the President, he sat in his office and watched the live broadcast with the country's giants because the Senate had sent back a very important message. A large number of high explosives had been installed in the theater. This kidnapping incident had already attracted the attention of those ferocious dog-like reporters. With the reform and development of the country, the media industry had been impacted by foreign countries. Now, almost half of the media industry in the country was under the control of foreign media. Therefore, not only was Rio in a mess, but even the neighboring countries, even North America across a continent, were paying attention to this matter at the same time. In the past hour, His Excellency the President had received greetings from several neighboring countries. This hijacking incident had become a diplomatic issue. I hope this matter can be resolved peacefully. His Excellency the President rubbed his forehead, then looked at the people in the office and calmed down. Everyone, let's continue the discussion on whether to remove the UPP troops. Minister of Finance, have you calculated how much we will lose if we withdraw? A thin middle-aged man stood up and said in a deep voice, Then, I will explain it to you right away. Bucky, Moria, Doflamingo, and Crocodile stood in a row at this time. Behind them were 4 submachine guns pointed at them. Obviously, once the 4 of them made any strange movements, they would face the wrath of bullets. The bandits inside, listen up. We have brought the prisoners to. A man used a loudspeaker and spoke loudly toward the theater. According to the instructions of his superior, he tried to negotiate with the bandits in the theater. I hope you won't be stubborn and cause more casualties. As long as you can come out and abandon your weapons and surrender. However, before he could finish his words, he heard a cry of alarm. A figure was thrown from the upper floor of the theater and smashed directly on the road in front of the theater door. The man was obviously a guest, but he was already dead. However, after being thrown from a high altitude, his head smashed on the asphalt road, and his brain directly burst open. Unlock their handcuffs, then send them to the front of the door. Then, your people retreat 10 meters away. Don't move. Someone passed a request to the police outside through the sound equipment in the theater. My patience is limited. If you continue to dawdle, the next person to be thrown out will be your Senate president. Send them to the front of the theater. Quick. You must ensure the safety of the Senate president. At this time, the theater door only opened a small gap, just enough for one person to pass through. Under the watchful eyes of many police officers, the 4 extremely serious criminals walked in one by one until the theater door closed again. At this time, in the temporary command center, a technician who was controlling various instruments installed in a modified car hidden in a nearby street immediately turned his head. Minister, Trojan's Trojan horse has been successfully deployed. The surveillance camera can be activated. From now on, we can understand the situation at the scene. Well, let the Trojan horse discover the ambush positions of all the bandits as much as possible. Let the next team be on standby at any time. When the location of the following bandits is grasped, the decapitation operation will begin. Yes. The technician turned to the microphone and said after pressing the button, Storm Team, continue to stand by. After Bucky and the others walked through the theater door, they were greeted by a dim light. The theater hall at the entrance was not lit at this time. These people were extremely vicious people, so the darkness naturally did not scare them. Roger. We are in, where are you? Bucky frowned at this time and looked around, but it was too dark for him to see the surrounding situation at all. Bang! Suddenly, a gunshot sounded. Bucky was startled and dodged back, bumping into Moria. At the same time, the lights in the theater hall were turned on in an instant. At the stairs, Roger was holding a P90 in his hand, pointing at the 4 people. Obviously, the shot just now was fired from this P90. Roger. Crocodile frowned. Everyone was also surprised and looked at Roger together. This man was expressionless, and no one knew whether he would shoot a second time next. But the next second, Roger suddenly put down the gun, then opened his hands and laughed. Wow! 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 My friends, long time no see. Did you miss me? Yes, it's really been a long time. Bucky shook his head. As soon as he appeared, he greeted them like this. It was really the madman's character. Just now, he really intended to shoot one of them, right? When you were in prison, I heard that you fled to Russia. When did you come back? Moria stepped forward. At the same time, he found that there were at least 4 guys hiding in different places. I came back half a year ago. Roger hugged Moria, then looked at the other 3 and said, Come on, let's go inside. If those stupid Rio policemen rush in here, I won't be able to stop them. Bucky, what are you looking at? Come here. The vases hanging here are worthless things, don't look at them anymore. Bucky shrugged and walked up. At this time, 2 gangsters came out of the dark and went directly to the gate of the theater. It seemed that they were guarding the first line of defense. After looking around a few times, Doflamingo smiled and said, This place is good for defense. How many people do you have this time? How many weapons do you have? How long can the ammunition last? Hey, guys, I know you have been trapped for several years, and you have been bored for a long time. Don't worry, I will let you make a big fuss. Roger laughed and led the 4 people into the concert hall. I want to go to the toilet. F***ck. I haven't heard anything along the way. I'm suffocating, Bucky said unhappily. Before I went out, the female prison guard with a big but was sucking it for me. I only did half of it. Roger smiled and did not say anything. He just waved his hand and said, Batu, take him there. The remaining 3 people, led by Roger, walked into a VIP room. Here, they naturally saw Rio's greedy fat pig and the Senate president. Both of them were celebrities and could be seen at any time on TV. Crocodile and the other 2 naturally recognized them. Moria seemed to be quite interested in the greedy fat pig. He went directly to Director Jose with a grin on his face. Director Jose was so scared that he almost fainted. Crocodile walked to the front of the stand and looked down at the concert hall. He smiled and said, It's really a big deal. There are so many people in this room. And there is our Senate President, who is the most important. Roger sneered. When the old Senate President heard this, he was angry but did not dare to say anything. Roger was already a homicidal maniac, and now there were 4 more extremely serious criminals. This group of lawless guys gathered together. It was unknown how much damage they would cause to the city. At this time, Doflamingo was sitting on the sofa leisurely, crossing his legs and looking at Roger. Roger, did you make such a big scene just to get us out? Doflamingo then said, You should understand that it is not difficult for us to get out. We just don't want to come out for the time being. Brother Ming, our era is about to start again. Roger's eyes were full of fanaticism. I want Rio to return to the state of 20 years ago and let everything return to the way it was before. Doflamingo sneered. With these hostages in your hands and your 20 or so men? Roger, it's not that I want to hurt you, but it is very likely that in the end, the 4 of us will just come out for a breather, and you and your men will go back with us. Do you know what is waiting for you outside? Helicopters, assault vehicles, riot squads, and even soldiers. There is no way for us to leave safely from so many encirclement. Roger said indifferently, Brother Ming, are you going to give up? It doesn't matter. I can let you out. So can Crocodile and Moria. As long as you ask, I can send you off personally. Haha. Roger, Brother Ming doesn't care about you. Moria sat up directly and used Director Jose as a chair. And you have to understand that we have already left the headquarters. We are no longer under you and the old man. If the benefits are not enough, we will not work for you. Roger suddenly laughed. Let me ask you, how many slums are there in Rio? Moria said without thinking, 600 or 700, but now because of the suppression of the UPP, our strength is less than half of what it used to be. Wait, are you going to let the UPP troops withdraw? This is just the first step. Roger smiled at this time, then took out a document from his clothes and said, In addition, I found this thing in Russia in the past few years. The thing Roger took out attracted the attention of several people. When Crocodile picked it up and opened it out of curiosity, his face suddenly changed slightly. What is it? Doflamingo frowned. Crocodile said solemnly, Nuclear bomb. Let me tell you, back in the day, I shot from the South Bridge to the North Bridge with one shot. That scene was called a river of blood. Do you know what people call me? Bucky, who had a red brandy nose, looked triumphantly at Batu, who accompanied him to the toilet. What's your name? Batu was not joking, but he was quite respectful to the former senior cadre of the Imperial headquarters. After all, each of these 4 people could be said to be a legendary figure in the underworld. Legendary bad guy. Bucky suddenly sneered, and as fast as lightning, he grabbed an alloy dagger from Batu's combat uniform. The dagger in Bucky's hand was like a living thing, spinning quickly, and finally sticking to Batu's neck in the blink of an eye. You. Batu could not figure out Bucky's intention at this time, but he was sweating. It's just a joke. Bucky shrugged at this time, then picked up the tip of the dagger and said, "This knife is good, I want it." Batu shook his head. Boss Roger was going to equip these 4 guys with weapons. A dagger was not enough. Fortunately, he took out the pistol from the combat uniform. Sometimes, throwing knives are more useful than bullets. Bucky shook his head. No one will not be afraid after seeing my throwing knives. My enemies, I will usually. What will they do? Buggy didn't go on because he saw people. He saw several people, men and women. The men were handsome, the women were beautiful, and there was even an old man. Good Lord, it was obvious that he was a Battle 5 trash at first glance. It was time to let people know how powerful he was. It was really fun to bully the weak. Chapter 788. Municipal Theater, Side Street, Modified Vehicular Command Center. Minister, the Trojan horse has successfully entered the concert hall. The number of criminals, their identities, and their hiding location are being confirmed. The technician quickly reported. The minister naturally couldn't stay idle. Now it could be said that it was a race against time. Once the criminals were completely enraged and went crazy, it would lead to a monstrous disaster. Not to mention that the people inside were either rich or noble, even ordinary people would bring great turmoil to the government. Just like the terrorist attack that happened in the United States more than a decade ago. But in order to guide domestic public opinion, they could launch a war against other countries. However, they had no other way. Because Roger was originally a very serious criminal in this country, he had always been on the wanted list. However, if a government directly compromised with these criminals, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for this government. Then, his credibility, which was not very good to begin with, would be completely gone. I hope this Trojan horse can help us solve this crisis. The Minister of Security rubbed his forehead with a headache. Among the 4 prisoners sent in, one had been persuaded by them to mix in as a spy and cooperate with the police rescue operation. But would that guy really be so obedient and choose to cooperate with the government? I hope so, the minister sighed, his gaze once again cast on the screen in front of the podium, looking at the situation in the concert hall bit by bit. In fact, Buggy thought that there was really no problem with his judgment. You see, although he and Batu were only 2 people, the other side had a total of 6 men and women. It seemed that the other side had the advantage. However, Batu was fully armed, and he still had a dagger in his hand, didn't he? What about the other side? 2 women in evening gowns, an old man, and the other 3 men were even more unarmed. This was simply like 2 kings meeting a rookie who didn't even know how to operate when fighting in the jungle. So Buggy thought that there was really no problem with his judgment. But why was it like this? Why was Batu's weapon already in the hands of someone else? Why was he pressed to the ground by this woman in a red evening gown? I am the legendary bad guy. Bucky Barton Barkus, I recognize you. At this moment, Song Howren sized up the other party with great interest. A senior cadre of the former Imperial Capital Command. Rumor has it that he doesn't have much ability, but his luck is the max. He was one of the chief's lucky stars back then. He's often muddle-headed and can complete missions without knowing why. He's the type who wins by lying down. But there are also people who say that you're an unfathomable man. Is that true? Buggy opened his mouth and suddenly glanced at Batu. At this time, he found that Batu had already been knocked to the ground, apparently unconscious. You. Who are you? At this time, Luvia had let go of Bucky, but she took a pistol from Oni's hand and held it against his back. Bucky had no choice but to raise his hands to show that he did not intend to resist. Under such circumstances, of course we are enemies. Song Howren smiled. Also, I'm more curious. You should be in prison, right? When did you break out of prison? Song Howren felt strange. Not long ago, when he used the Sun God's badge, He did not sense Bucky's appearance in his perception. Or, during this period of time, what new changes have occurred? It seems that there are still drawbacks for not being able to activate the perception ability of the Sun God's badge all the time. I didn't break out of prison, Bucky swallowed. He found that he seemed to often encounter people pointing guns at his back in his life. So he was very clear that in this case, if he wanted to protect his life, what he needed to do was naturally to cooperate with the other party as much as possible. But why can these guys put me and Batu down with bare hands? This is not scientific. So this is one of Roger's requests to the government? Song Howren nodded and keenly caught a trace of Roger's thoughts. Who else is there besides you? Bucky had to report his name directly. At the same time, he secretly thought that this guy had a keen intuition. Is this guy cheating? Song Howren was silent. As a mercenary group active in the dark world of South America, Iris Flower had done a lot of business. Starting from his father, the leader of Iris Flower, it had been a long journey. Over the past few days, Iris Flower had cooperated with the Imperial Capital Command headquarters before. The few fellows that Roger had gotten out of prison this time were all rich and powerful. Although they were arrested and imprisoned, they still secretly controlled a lot of assets. Although the UPP suppressed a lot of slums, it did not mean that the traditional forces of this country disappeared so easily. They were just dormant, waiting for the day of their return. Song Howren suddenly said at this time, "It's a disaster to let you out. This is undoubtedly a miscalculation for our government. Well, in order to block the public's mouth, please die here. After that, you can use the words accidentally killed in a fight with the gangsters." Bucky suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He had killed a lot of people, so he knew very well what kind of eyes looked like when killing people. This was obviously the eyes of the other party now. So, why did you let me out? Isn't it good to stay in prison? The food is good, the entertainment is good, there are female prison guards to play with, and I can play Texas poker with the warden when I am free. I don't have to worry about the assassination of my enemies. Except that I can't leave prison. It's no different from a vacation. Wait, what did he just say? Our government? Is this guy a member of the government? Wait, don't do it first. Bucky hurriedly said, "Don't do it first. I came in with a special mission this time." I am. You are. Song Howren narrowed his eyes and then chuckled. You want to say that you have an agreement with the government. You sneaked in here, grasped the situation here, and cooperated with the outside? How did you know? Bucky was stunned. He looked at Song Howren in amazement. How did this guy guess my thoughts? Song Howren's eyes narrowed imperceptibly and he suddenly said, Chong, you keep an eye on this guy. Don't let him move. Oni nodded and walked over with a slightly unnatural posture. Then, he clasped Bucky's hands. Song Howren was checking the equipment that he had stripped from Ba Tuesday. He took out the other party's walkie-talkie. It was unknown what he was thinking. Luvia quietly came to Song Howren's side and asked in a low voice, "Do you really believe his words? Do you want to check it?" If he had really assisted the government, then Bucky would have at least hidden a surveillance device on him. If they could not find it, then the lie would be exposed. Don't you think it's interesting? Song Howren narrowed his eyes. Luvia was stunned and said, "Interesting?" Song Howren said indifferently, "Roger's real intention." Luvia frowned and said, "But there are a lot of explosives hidden here. After all, it's too dangerous. I promised Dad that I would protect you." Song Howren said, "Do you think Roger really dares to press the detonator? Although he is a madman, he is certainly not crazy enough to risk his life to perish together with the enemy. If he still has something in his heart that he wants to accomplish, then he will cherish his life more. So, before he safely leaves the theater, we are the safest." With that, he glanced at Luaccio and the others who were left aside and whispered in Luvia's ear, "Now, there are all people from the government outside. They had already surrounded the outside of the city so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. Although we can leave now, once we walk out of the theater, we are bound to be discovered by the police. The three of them should be fine, but the three of us? Luvia nodded solemnly. Their identities were all fake and could not be verified by the police. Moreover, a large number of hostages in the concert hall were still being held, while they walked out safely. If the group of police in Rio were not full of fat, they would definitely investigate carefully. We can only wait for the police to rescue us, and then we can blend in with the hostages and leave, Luvia said helplessly. If they left before the arrival of the police deployment, they did not have to care about this, but now it was obvious that they had missed the best opportunity. Luvia glanced at Song Hauran. Originally, the military counselor who happened to be outside and communicating with Dad before the accident could have left directly, but he stayed. Luvia subconsciously held Song Hauran's hand. The three people you have with you are a burden. Do you think we should? After all, they have seen what we look like. Song Hauran shook his head. They don't know our identity. They just think that we are people sent by the government to rescue them. Although it is not easy for us to leave, if they go out, there should be no problem. Let's find an opportunity to send them out halfway. Military counselor. Luvia seemed to want to say something. Song Hauran said, Dad taught us that one more friend is one less enemy. Whether it is Frankie or Luaccio, their identities are not simple. Maybe they can be useful in the future? Life is a huge river. There are fish in it, and we are the fish in it. We will meet again. Luvia did not say anything more. At this time, they moved the unconscious Batu and Buggy to a pantry in the corridor. There was a lot of food here. It was originally for the guests in the VIP room, but now it was good for everyone to replenish their physical strength. It was easy for people to lose their physical strength and consume their body heat in fear and tension. Song Hauran suggested that everyone take a 10-minute break here for the time being. Dr. Frankie took out his mobile phone at this time and waved it around, but he could not receive a signal. Song Hauran said, It is useless. The criminals should have released a special interference wave. Otherwise, with so many people in the concert hall holding mobile phones, it is impossible for the police not to know the situation here. It should be said that without the permission of the channel, there is no way to contact the outside world. Dr. Frankie shook his head, grabbed a bottle of champagne here, walked to the corner and squatted down, drinking alone, or maybe to boost his courage. Are you okay? Song Hauran, Luaccio and Yu Yi sat quietly in the corner, walked to Luaccio and asked casually. Not bad. Boss Luo responded simply. He should be the kind of person who should be traveling with his family. It seemed that he should not be too calm. So Boss Luo then asked with concern, Mr. Song, can we get out safely? Song Hauran smiled and said, We will go to the second floor later. The bathroom there has a window. I checked before, next to the window is a sewer. It should be no problem to climb down. The police are outside. As long as you don't alarm the criminals halfway, you should be safe if there is a gunfight. That's good. Luaccio nodded. Song Hauran tore open a packet of biscuits and sent it to Luaccio, blinked and said, Don't let your lovely companion starve. This is not the behavior of a gentleman. Luaccio smiled slightly. Song Hauran seemed to be born to give people a good sense of security. He was humorous and elegant, confident and orderly, as if he was a person who was confident that he could do everything. There was a God in his heart, and he was confident that he was that God, so he was strong. Have you ever played with a pistol? Song Hauran took a pistol and quickly pulled the safety off in front of Luaccio, and asked at the same time. I played at the shooting club. Luaccio thought and said truthfully, but they are all domestic goods. In fact, they are all about the same. Song Hauran put the pistol in front of Luaccio, and there were 2 clips of bullets. A real gun is slightly heavier, so when pointing at the enemy it is best to raise your wrist slightly, so it is not easy to shoot down when shooting. He grabbed Luacio's wrist and let Luacio hold the pistol, and then he pointed the gun at himself and adjusted his posture slightly. Yes, like this. Oh, very good, your hand is not too shaky, you have some potential. Luacio suddenly asked, Can you let me hold it? If we meet the enemy and we fight, I may not be able to protect you. Song Hauran waved his hand and said, The one who can protect yourself the most is yourself. Don't feel burdened, these are all murderers whose hands are stained with blood. If you kill one, the King of Hell may record your merit in the merit book. Boss Lua relaxed a bit, smiled and said, I always feel that you are cursing me to die later. Song Hauran laughed and said, It was a slip of the tongue, I was talking about later. My old man believes in this kind of thing. He has heard a lot since he was young, don't be offended. Your father is? Luacio slightly raised his head. Song Hauran did not seem to want to say more and just said casually, He is a hospitable person, especially us Chinese. But he has not been out for a long time, and has been recuperating at home recently. Boss Luo did not continue to ask, so that it would be natural. At this moment, a man's voice suddenly sounded in the pantry, startling Dr. Frankie. It turned out that the communicator that Batu carried with him was ringing. He led Batu to the toilet and did not return for a long time, which obviously aroused the suspicion of the criminals. Batu, can you hear me? Reply. We found a fish that we missed on the 4th floor corridor, and it is a big fish. Leader Billy, where are you? Immediately launch a pincer attack. Reply. The walkie-talkie kept ringing. Chapter 789. If there was no response, it would immediately arouse the other party's suspicion. Everyone looked at the walkie-talkie placed on the bar counter in silence, as if they were afraid that even a little sound would attract the other party's attention. Song Hauran's eyes narrowed slightly, and suddenly reached out and grabbed Buggy's shoulder. I say one sentence, you say one sentence, do you understand? I will cooperate. Buggy nodded. Oni never let the muzzle leave his back from beginning to end. Buggy sighed and tried to make his voice calm down. He quickly picked up the walkie-talkie and said loudly, Roger, I'll be right there. You're not Batu? Who are you? The person on the walkie-talkie suddenly said angrily at this time. However, another voice sounded at this time. Roger's voice, Buggy? Why is it you? Where's Batu? Buggy glanced at Song Hauran at this time, only to see him quickly whisper a few words in his ear, and then repeated, Hey, Roger, your people fell into the cesspool and can't get out. What did you eat before the operation, and your shit is so smelly? Roger on the other side of the walkie-talkie was silent for a while, and then said, Where are you now? The bar counter on the left side of the corridor on the 3rd floor. I'm hungry, looking for something to eat. Oh, your people are coming out, I'll let them talk to you. At this time, Oni's footsteps were heard. No need. Buggy, you and Batu go up the stairs on the left, shoot big fish down, and then come and meet me. Over. Roger, I'll be right there. Buggy turned off the walkie-talkie, then looked at Song Hauran with a lingering fear, and said with a wry smile, Are you satisfied now? Oni behind him looked at him suspiciously. Are you really a mole in the police? Buggy seized the opportunity and said, If I'm not, why should I help you? Can't I just inform Roger directly? Oni sneered, Because you're afraid of death. Don't talk too much. Bucky glared at Oni and said innocently, Believe it or not, I really don't want to participate in any of Roger's actions. This time, he was the one who proposed the terms, forcing the government to release all of us. In fact, compared to the outside world, I prefer to stay in prison. Inside, the warden and I are both emperors. Really? But this is only your side of the story, right? Oni sneered. He didn't believe Buggy's words at all. But at the same time, he couldn't understand why the military advisor would bring this guy along. Unexpectedly, Dr. Frankie suddenly said, We have to rescue Mr. Billy. We can't let him fall into the hands of the bandits. Song Hauran said indifferently, Doctor, we can't even take care of ourselves now. I'm afraid we don't have the energy to save people. I'll send you out first. Shaoli, take the doctor with you. While the bandits are distracted, we can leave this place. You can't do this. You have to save him. You have to save Mr. Billy. But the old doctor, who was shouting, couldn't get rid of Luvia's hands. He could only try to persuade everyone while being pulled to move. Before leaving, Boss Luo took away the ballpoint pen and sticky notes placed on the bar counter. Although Song Haoran found Luochio's actions strange, he didn't ask much. Everyone then left the bar except for Oni. But he soon caught up with everyone and quietly made a gesture to Song Haoran. But Buggy thought of the unconscious Ba Tu who was not brought out. He thought that Ba Tu might have been quietly killed, although it was understandable if the bandits were killed in a fight. But in this case, it didn't seem to be the police's style to kill someone when they had already caught him alive. Are these guys really from the government? Bang 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 bang. A few gunshots suddenly rang out. They didn't know whether these were bullets fired by Roger for fun, or by the bandits chasing after Mr. Billy, or by Billy's resistance. However, the place to evacuate that Song Haoran mentioned was already in front of them. Song Haoran opened the window of the bathroom and quickly glanced down. There were at least 7 police cars parked on the street. The police put up riot shields and stood in a human wall, completely encircling the area below. You'll be safe if you go down from here. Song Haoran turned around and smiled, but it may be difficult for a lady to climb down. It's a pity that such a beautiful dress is wasted. Yu Yi looked at the sewer next to her with some difficulty. Do I really have to climb down in such an indecent way? But since her master chose to use this method to contact Song Haoran, she could only continue to act like a normal person. Although it was a little painful, in order to better suit the current situation, Miss Maid could only directly tear the hem of her dress to make it easier for her to move. For a moment, a touch of white seemed to appear, but it disappeared in an instant. It turned out that Luochio had taken off his coat and wrapped Yu Ye's waist. I'll give you another one when we go back, the boss whispered to Miss Maid. The owner whispered in the servant girl's ear. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at Luvia who was guarding the door and added, the one and only. Abiding by the principle of ladies first, Luochio helped Yu Yi climb up the windowsill and then groped for the sewer outside the wall. Because it was only on the second floor, it was easy for them to slide to the ground. After that, it was Dr. French's turn. He didn't yell because before this, Song Haoran promised that the 3 of them wouldn't leave just like that. They would stay here because their mission was not completed yet. Dr. Frankie could only repeatedly urge Song Haoran to save Mr. Billy as well. It's your turn. Song Haoran finally looked at Luochio. Boss Luo suddenly said, will we have a chance to meet again? Song Haoran was stunned, then smiled and said, didn't we meet twice in the past few days? Luochio also smiled, and then quickly took out a piece of paper and a pen. He quickly wrote an address on the paper and handed it to Song Haoran. This is where I'm currently living. If it's safe, I hope you can come to me. After all, you saved me. If possible, please let me thank you properly, even if it's just a dinner. As a result, the address written by Luochio, Song Haoran glanced at it and said in surprise, you seem to have prepared to give me the address? After all, I don't know how to find you, so I can only let you come to me. Luochio said casually. Song Haoran directly put away the address and showed a charming smile. If I can eat the authentic braised meatballs, that would be even better. Definitely. Luochio then climbed down the small water pipe. Song Haoran didn't withdraw his gaze until he saw Luochio land and the police stationed opposite sent people to contact him. Then, he glanced at Luvia and Oni, and they directly carried Bucky and quickly left. Finally sent out the address. Song Haoran should come, right? Luochio's face showed a smile. At this time, Dr. Frankie was staring worriedly at the top of the theater, his face full of melancholy. At this time, the servant girl quietly walked past the old doctor. Her hand quietly swiped, and a black card was stuffed into Dr. Frankie's pocket. The servant girl smiled at her master. Luochu showed a harmless smile, and the two walked directly in front of the police who came to greet them. But the police could only see Dr. French. What happened? Only then did Frankie come over, only to find that the young man and woman had disappeared. "You are Dr. French, right?" A middle-level police officer looked at Dr. French with a little respect at this time. The doctor's face was gloomy, and he hurriedly said, "The leader of Billy's party is also inside, you better work harder." "What? Not only the head of the Senate, but also the leader of the proportional party?" Hearing this news, the sheriff hurriedly reported, "That was the leader of the party." Now that the president was about to change, no one could say for sure whether the next one in power would be Mr. Billy's regime or not. After that, Dr. Frankie was taken to a safe place to wait. He didn't want to leave just like that. He looked at the theater that was surrounded by soldiers from afar and muttered to himself, "Ever since the big explosion, my research has been frozen. The country doubted my ability and has been unwilling to provide me with research funds. This time, Mr. Billy is finally willing to support me and buy foreign technology for me. Please don't have an accident. You will want to fulfill your wish? No matter what it is." Something was whispering in Dr. Frankie's ears, which made his heart tremble. "Haven't you caught them yet? Roger, your men seem to have ordinary abilities." In the VIP room, Crocodile shook his head, seeming a little disappointed. Roger indifferently said, "They won't be able to escape. Besides, Buggy is also involved. I believe that they'll be able to catch this big fish for me very soon. However, I really didn't expect that in addition to the head of the Senate, there is also a party leader in this concert. It seems that Buggy is really a lucky guy. He just came and gave me a big surprise." "Lucky bastard." Crocodile shook his head, then stared at the information that Roger had taken out not long ago with a dignified expression. The country that was powerful enough to clamor with the world's overlords before and after World War II had now disintegrated, but what Roger found was the legacy left by the country before its disintegration. Nuclear weapons were a terrible thing. Strictly speaking, this thing was a hard standard to measure whether a country could be ranked as a powerful country. From the moment they saw this information, Doflamingo and Moria didn't make a sound. The faces of these two vipers were gloomy and terrible. They seemed to be surprised that Roger could find such a terrible thing. Suddenly, Doflamingo sighed and said with a sly smile, "So that's how it is. Is this your confidence? Very good. Roger, no matter what you want to do, count me in." "I knew you would agree. Moria?" Roger looked at Moria, who was sitting on Jose's body. This guy showed a ferocious smile at this time, as if he was too excited to control himself. He looked up and pulled the pistol in front of Jose's head. The bullet directly penetrated Jose's head. At the same time, he stood up directly at the moment when Jose fell powerlessly. "I have no reason not to participate. What about Crocodile?" Roger nodded with satisfaction and looked at Crocodile just now. Crocodile shrugged and said indifferently, "Only Buggy's opinion. But I think we can ignore his opinion, because he doesn't dare to say no." "Ha ha ha!" Roger laughed a few times. Then, the real first step, let's overthrow the current regime. Doflamingo and the others looked at Roger at the same time, showing an expression of, as expected. This guy is really going to launch a coup. This is not a chaotic small country in Africa, but a big country in South America. Sure enough, he is a madman. Roger clapped his hands at this time and asked someone to bring out the Senate president. He looked at the white-haired, terrified old man and revealed a playful smile. "I've changed my mind. From now on, in 30 minutes, have the president and his entire cabinet appear in front of me. I want to negotiate with the president directly. As usual, I will kill one person if you are late for 1 minute. You will be the first one." This How can you gather so many people in 30 minutes? The Senate president was trembling at this time. Shouldn't they be discussing the removal of the UPP at this time? They should have already gathered, right? Isn't it convenient to come together? Roger sneered. The old Senate president's eyes widened. For a moment, he seemed to think of something. Was the condition of removing the troops just an inducement? The real purpose was to gather all the people in the center of national power? Roger directly asked someone to throw a phone to the Senate president, then looked at the time and said, "Now the countdown begins. I hope you can be on time." The old man's hands were shaking at this time. He felt that the phone was like a 10-kilogram dumbbell, extremely heavy. "Minister, the approximate location of all the bandits has been confirmed. In addition, Director Jose is dead. The bandits want His Excellency the President and Cabinet Ministers to appear in 30 minutes. The situation is critical." In the command car, the Minister of Security, with a grave expression, wiped the sweat off his face. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Storm Squad, attack! The first mission is to rescue the Senate President. Send the order to the Trojan horse and let it create an opportunity." Roger. The technician hurriedly pressed the button. "Storm Squad, prepare to attack." That night there was an unprecedented traffic jam in Rio. The whole city seemed to be shaking because of the roar of car horns. After escaping from the hospital, Caroline walked into a taxi in a daze, her heart in a mess. Being caught in a big traffic jam made Caroline even more impatient. "Driver, what's going on in front?" The driver looked back at the female passenger in surprise. "Don't you know? There was a big hijacking in the theater. A lot of people with status were kidnapped by the bandits. They still have to negotiate with the country. I heard that they want the president to be there in person. I've been talking about this on the radio." Caroline was stunned. She had not been paying attention to what the radio said. Now that she was listening carefully, her expression became one of astonishment. This city. What was going on tonight? Chapter 790. Pastel was a delicious snack commonly seen on the streets of Rio. It was a bit like the smoked meat pie in China. It was made by spreading flour into a square, then wrapping it in cheese, adding beef or chicken, and finally frying it in a pan of oil. The vendor had already fried several servings of pastel, but no one was interested. The reason was naturally because of the theater hostage incident that completely paralyzed the traffic on the busiest road in Rio. Of course, the peddler didn't care much about this small amount of sales. He was also paying attention to the latest information about the theater incident on Twitter, as well as the congratulatory messages sent by various people. It was the so-called insider information. All in all, that night, Rio was full of demons and devils, and the onlookers were tirelessly participating in the unprecedented discussion. "I want 2 servings of pastel." Wait. Although he was a little reluctant because he was watching the most interesting part of the gossip, the vendor still responded to the customer who came to his stall, a young customer. "Oriental?" The vendor looked at the young man in surprise. There was a woman behind the young man. She was wrapped in a suit jacket. Her skirt was probably torn or something. But she was still in the mood to buy food here? Shouldn't she be watching from the front and becoming a member of the great audience? The vendor was absent-minded as he packed the food. His eyes never left his phone. "There should be a lot of people over there who are hungry. Maybe you can bring some fresh pastel and ask the crowd to buy. I think business should be good." After the young man took the 2 servings of pastel from the vendor, he smiled. The vendor was stunned, then he slapped his head. F***ck. Why didn't I think of this as the best time to do business? There are so many people here. There must be a lot of people who haven't eaten dinner yet. "Thank you." "Where is she?" The vendor could no longer see the young man, and even the woman who was waiting for him had disappeared. But he didn't think too much about it. Instead, his hands were almost invisible as he madly made fresh pastel. Then, he put it in a basket and rushed into the crowd, shouting, fresh pastel from the pot, buy 3, buy 4 get 1 free. Looking at the peddler brother who was yelling hard and starting to have business, the servant girl who was taking a bite of pastel smiled faintly. The ingredients are not very fresh, but the sauce is specially made, so it tastes good. For street food, it's indeed very good. The boss smiled. Yu Yi took a handkerchief and wiped the grease from the boss's mouth, so that her master could be a clean and quiet foodie. Speaking of which, I forgot to return this pistol. Boss Luo took out a pistol, which was given to him by Song Haoran. He shook his head. Forget it. I'll return it the next time we meet. Yu Yi suddenly asked, Master, Mr. Song has that thing on him, is it okay? Luoqiu said indifferently, It's just a remnant soul that has just been born. No matter what kind of glory or power it had in the past, it has now disappeared in the long river of history. Whether it succeeds in becoming Song Haoran, or Song Haoran succeeds in becoming it, that's the fate between him and it. But is it an ancient relic hidden in the depths of the jungle? It seems that there may be other gains in this trip to South America. The servant girl didn't ask any more questions. Her master only cared about the story behind his father's life, not the so-called blood relative. Speaking of which, I've only done one business here in a few days. It's not very good. Luoqiu pondered for a moment. I can almost hear a lot of desires. Then, I'll take a little more business. Hearing this, the servant girl nodded, put down the pastel that she had just eaten, and stood up. But Luoqiu pulled her to sit down again and whispered, Don't worry, finish eating first. With that said, he also wiped a touch of grease from the edge of Yu Ye's lips with his sleeve and whispered, I solidified your taste buds so that you can remember the taste of all the delicacies. The servant girl responded softly. The boss raised his hand and a light screen appeared on his left. The image that appeared was of Caroline, who was stuck in a taxi on the road. After a glance, Boss Luo no longer paid attention to it. Then, he looked towards the theater. This glance peeled off all the outer walls of the theater, leaving only the internal structure of the theater in sight. This iconic building no longer had any secret. Luvia originally thought that after sending Dr. Frankie and the other two away, Song Haoran would plan to hide and wait for the real rescue outside, or mix in with the hostages again to create more opportunities to leave. But Song Haoran asked Bucky to contact the bandits who were arresting Mr. Billy. It seemed that he really intended to meet these bandits. Rumor has it that Mr. Billy is a very grateful person. Song Haoran smiled and said, I wonder how he will repay us after we save him? Luvia couldn't help but complain. Military counselor, no matter how grateful a person is, he is still a politician, okay? Song Haoran said, That's even better. Politicians are often the ones who hire us the most. Dad has accumulated a lot of clients over the years, so I also need to accumulate my own client. Oni didn't oppose Song Haoran's plan. Or it could be said that he needed to see blood tonight, but it was stopped. He was already a bit impatient. If I go back and my wives know that I was kidnapped, they will definitely laugh at me. I don't want this to be a stain in my life. Luvia was still a bit conservative. She was full of worries and resisted Song Haoran's adventurous character from the bottom of her heart. Song Haoran suddenly lifted Luvia's chin and said intimately, Besides, don't forget our action tonight. Although Dad said to stop the action temporarily, there is no such word in Song Haoran's dictionary. She couldn't win this man's wild beast-like eyes under the noble young master's shell. You will definitely become the king of iris flowers. According to Song Haoran's instructions, Oni and Luvia were directly lying in ambush at this time, waiting for the people who were chasing Billy to appear, and then ambush them unexpectedly. As for Buggy, Song Haoran personally looked after him and directed his actions. Hey kid, you're not really a government person, are you? Buggy's eyes flickered and no one knew what he was thinking. You're not a mole in the police force, are you? Song Haoran replied in a neutral tone. Let's make a deal. If you let me go, I can give you unimaginable wealth. Brother, we're just looking for wealth. There's no need to lose our lives. Buggy quickly suggested. Song Howren curiously asked, You seem to believe that Roger can win this round? The outside is full of armed forces, and this place is impenetrable. Do you really think he can easily escape? Or do you really think that he has the capital to negotiate with the country with these hostages in his hands? Buggy shook his head. According to what you said, there is no such thing. Both sides are just stalling for time. Including the release of me and Moria, it's all a snatch of time. But we old guys watched Roger grow up. Although he is a complete madman, he is not a fool. He will never do things that he is not sure of. That's why I think he might have some crucial cards up his sleeve. A card that really makes him dare to talk to the country is called the Ace of Spades. You're not as stupid as the rumors say. Song Howren nodded and suddenly said, Do you know that Roger buried a lot of explosives here that can raise this place to the ground in a few seconds? Buggy's face changed dramatically at this moment, and he looked at Song Howren in horror. If it's true, damn! Why didn't I just climb the drainage pipe with the old man and the young couple and leave? It's too dangerous here. I want to go back to prison. Are you sure I'm joking? Song Howren looked at Buggy with a playful look. Buggy's face was pale and he smiled bitterly. Roger can do it. During the great hunt back then, this madman lured all the enemies to his father's side and used his father as a shield. Only then was he able to escape. So there is nothing he can't do. I won't let you go. If you dare to leave now, I will kill you directly. Song Howren's eyes were murderous. Buggy looked depressed and felt that luck had left him. He had to say with a sullen face, What do you want me to do? Of course, it's something that suits your current identity. Song Howren smiled. I am a government person, and you are a mole in the police. We naturally need to cooperate, don't we? If you don't want to die here, then you'd better display your value to the fullest. Buggy sighed. He was helpless and full of hatred. He stared at Song Howren and said, I know you and Roger are actually the same type of people. Your ambition is boundless. Thank you for the compliment. Song Howren handed a dagger to Buggy. I have always been friendly to my collaborators. Buggy frowned and finally took the dagger. He really didn't want to participate in any of Roger's actions. He really felt that prison was more suitable for him. Even if he didn't know what Roger was planning behind the scenes, the kidnapping incident alone was enough of a crime. He was sure that the officials he had spent a lot of time building a good relationship with would never protect him afterward. I'm sorry, Luogia. I really just want to be a quiet person in prison. Looking at Buggy's eyes, Song Howren knew that this guy had been successfully instigated. Haven't you caught the big fish yet? Your people are really slow. Crocodile frowned. Roger said indifferently, It's just a hidden rat. It can't run far. Anyway, there's still some time. Just treat it as an entertainment. Crocodile snorted and suddenly looked at the Senate leader who was guarded in the corner. He grinned. Speaking of which, I have a personal grudge with this old guy. Roger, let me have a good chat with this old guy. Roger was a little curious. Crocodile looked at the old Senate leader and sneered. This old guy has probably forgotten how much trouble the bill he promoted 5 years ago brought to me. You mean the foreign trade case 5 years ago? The old Senate leader was surprised. You may not know that my business is foreign trade. Thanks to your care, my business has suffered a great loss. Crocodile sneered and walked directly to the old man. He grabbed his hair and dragged him to the door. Give me 20 minutes. I promise to let him come back alive. Roger waved his hand, but let people follow him. He said indifferently, Watch him closely. This old man can't take a beating. Don't let Crocodile accidentally kill him. Got it, boss. One of the men nodded and followed him out. Moria shook his head. I heard that this guy killed a lot of people in prison. Why is he still so rude after such a long time? Brother Ming, why don't you talk? You've been silent since just now. Are you thinking of something bad? I'm suddenly curious about one thing. Brother Ming looked at Roger. How did you find such a horrible guy? I don't believe in the existence of these big guys, but I'm curious. Why did you get it? Roger said indifferently, I'll tell you later. Of course, I know your character. If you don't figure it out, you will never give up. But, Brother Ming, I want to remind you that the world is very big. Sometimes, some things are far beyond your knowledge. When you really come into contact with some things, you will know how small the world was in the past. Doflamingo frowned. I don't like this kind of rhetoric, but Doflamingo couldn't say it because the walkie-talkie Roger was holding on the table suddenly exploded at this time. It was a scream. Everyone could hear that the voice belonged to Bucky. Roger. Reinforcements. Reinforcements. Help. What happened? Roger picked up the walkie-talkie and asked directly. After waiting for 10 seconds, there was no sound from the other side. He then called another person who was sent to catch Billy, but there was no response. Roger's face was gloomy like an extinct volcano. It seems that this big fish bit the net. Moria chuckled. Billy? Crocodile and the Senator have some old feelings that need to be contacted. I also have some things to visit this guy. Wait. Roger frowned. Things are a bit strange. Including Bucky and Badu, we have a total of 5 people. According to the report, there are only 2 bodyguards around Billy, and they only have pistols in their hands. What do you want to say? Doflamingo looked at Roger with interest and suddenly smiled. You said Bucky is a fraud? That coward? Be careful, you will live longer, Roger said indifferently. He waved his hand and said, except for the people who control the scene in the concert hall and the first line of defense, the rest of the people follow me. Moria and Brother Ming, you come too. In addition, tell Crocodile that if the President's people don't appear in 15 minutes, throw the Senator's body out of the window. Everyone acted. In the concert hall, in addition to the conductor who died directly in front of everyone at the beginning, there were several other bodies. These people were directly killed by Roger when he was amused. The bodies were piled up casually in the corner. In front of him, there were 8 burly men with submachine guns in their hands, standing in different positions. How many guests were there in the concert hall? Of course, it was dozens of times more than these 8 gangsters. But the problem was, who dared to hit the ruthless muzzle? They had been pampered for too long. They cherished life and were unwilling to fight for the precious future. Mom, I want to go home. There was the sound of children sobbing in the crowd, but soon someone reached out to cover it, for fear of provoking the ferocity of these fanatics. Oh God, please save us. God, who cares? What's wrong with the police? Husband, I'm scared. Panic and despair seemed to have found the best hotbed, growing at a terrifying speed and shrouding everyone's heads. Then they seemed to hear something whispering. Chapter 791. In terms of form, the operation was similar to the virtual game world that Miss Maid and Taiyinzi had created together. It sold a single product and let customers who were willing to buy such things buy it. Of course, this time it was not a product that the club actively produced. It just happened to be in a situation that was desired by more than one people. Product name: survival. In order to survive, humans were often willing to give up a lot of things. I'm about to die, what else do I have to hold on to? Of course, the public thought so. Fear and despair bred in this huge concert hall. As time went by, the desire of the hostages here had been pushed to the peak. The police didn't take any action for a long time. They were isolated from the outside world. Every second was as sad as the end of the year. The shadow lingering in their hearts couldn't be removed. Evil thoughts were born. Who can save me? Even the devil can outside the theater. On the rooftop of a building facing the theater, Miss Maid, who had finished a delicious pastel, looked at Boss Luo. There are a total of 479 hostages, and a total of 263 people who are willing to buy the survival service. This was equivalent to only doing one thing, but the transaction fee of 263 customers was obtained. Although the quality might not be comparable to any of Boss Luo's previous orders, in terms of pure quantity, it was one of the top 3 deals he had ever done. "Do you still want to wait, master?" Miss Maid's eyes were bright. She was naturally in charge of accepting the order this time. Normal Black Soul envoys didn't have the complex calculation ability of Miss Maid. She had to contact all the hostages and complete 263 parts of the contract, which was equivalent to dividing her spirit into a certain number of parts. Each part of her spirit would communicate with a customer. This was no longer a simple field of doing 2 things at once. "The police have started to take action." Luochu shook his head at this time. No one knows if the police's rescue process will irritate the gangsters. In the conflict, if the customers who have reached the contract are hurt, it means we broke our promise. We don't have to wait. Of course, he could wait until the last moment. He could even wait until the next day. All he had to do was to add something like a protective shield to each customer so that they would be intact even under the impact of the explosion. However, the price he would have to pay would naturally be greater. After the event, he would have to eliminate the effects of this miraculous event. That would be a complete loss. In addition, the pricing this time was surprisingly good. Each customer only had to pay 3 months of life. Was 3 months of lifespan a lot? Different people had different opinions. When some people fell seriously ill, their vitality would be depleted. If they didn't get good rest and replenishment, their life would be shortened by 1 or 2 years. But at the same time, he was only doing one thing. However, lifespan was one of the cheapest types of transaction fees. Strictly speaking, the profit he made was next to nothing. Fortunately, there were a lot of orders, so it was barely acceptable. Boss Luo waved his hand, and the space in front of him was distorted. In the middle of the whirlpool, something seemed to be floating. It was all the high explosives that the criminals had buried in the theater. "Replace." Boss Luo snapped his fingers again. Suddenly, a large amount of gray powdery substance was separated from each of the explosive. Then, new things were filled in. They were replaced with a kind of simple black gunpowder. When so many explosives exploded at the same time, the power was probably equivalent to a firecracker with 300,000 sounds. Boss Luo stretched out his hand and pushed slightly. The explosives that were pulled out from the space whirlpool were slowly pushed into the whirlpool. Finally, everything returned to normal. In this way, even if Roger presses the detonator, there won't be any casualties. Boss Luo smiled. "The only thing left is their guns. Yu Yi, go and walk around." Boss Luo shook his head at this moment. Completing the distribution of goods with the least effort and making more money by taking advantage of the situation. He seemed to hear a pleasant laughter in his mind. The altar that was imagined as a lowly's voice seemed to be saying, "This is the right way to open the door." Then, he would treat it as occasionally satisfying this altar that could eat a lot of things. Boss Luo smiled and looked at Yu Yi, who had changed back into her work clothes, jumping toward the theater in front. Suddenly, he took out the golden Suharto camera just to record this scene. Let's call it Fragrant Trace Under the Moon's Shadow? To Buggy's surprise, the other 2 subordinates of Song Hauran were F*King Awesome Fighters. Although they had killed Batu and obtained his equipment, the 3 fellows that Oni and Luvia had to deal with were also fully armed dangerous players. This man and woman actually killed the 3 people silently. Buggy couldn't even hear any gunshot. "You are mercenaries?" Buggy suddenly came to such a conclusion. The ordinary ones, such as the large number of his former subordinates, were the idle people of the original society that he had recruited, or the poor children. These people could only form combat power through general training, but their combat power would not be too strong. Only those mercenaries who risked their lives or soldiers trained in the army could have such means. The latter, Oni and Luvia, were naturally not the latter. Otherwise, why would Song Hauran say those words of cooperation to him? "What do you think Roger will do next?" Song Hauran did not answer but asked, Does he suspect you? Or does he not suspect you? Buggy's face was gloomy. Anyway, deceiving Roger this time was equivalent to betraying him. Of course, in the Grey world, betrayal was a common thing. Roger had also betrayed his father directly before. It was just a common thing, but it did not mean that he could accept it when he was betrayed. Roger would definitely shoot him directly. It seemed that there was no way to get off Song Howren's pirate ship. He hoped that the ship would not capsize. I think he will send someone to confirm it again. Buggy thought about it and felt that this was the most likely possibility. However, Song Howren's eyes lit up as he said, "Why didn't he do it himself and cut the Gordian knot? It can't be?" Buggy hesitated. "You will know later." Song Howren smiled indifferently, and then showed a smile. "Now, let me get to know the leader of Billy's gang. Luvia, invite Mr. Billy here. Be polite." In less than 10 seconds, Oni and Luvia brought 3 embarrassed men to Song Howren. 2 of them were bodyguards. One of them was bleeding from his arm, and the injury was not very serious. As for Mr. Billy, his face was pale. Obviously, he was too frightened. But after all, he was a gang leader and was still calm at this time. Mr. Billy, who was in his 40s, was at the peak of his career. Naturally, he had the spirit of a big boss. "Which department do you belong to?" In Billy's view, these people had extraordinary skills. They fought with the gangsters and saved him. For the time being, they could be classified as non-enemies. But he was not sure whether they were allies or not. Song Howren said, "Let's not talk about this first. Mr. Billy, we have successfully sent Dr. Frankie out. Please come with me." "Doctor?" Mr. Billy was startled, and then showed a touch of joy. He nodded in surprise. "Thank you. No matter who you are, I will not forget your kindness in the future." He could hear that Song Howren seemed to be deliberately hiding his identity. Now that there was a crisis, he was not a person who stuck to trifles, so he simply followed good advice. At this time, da-da-da, there was a series of urgent sounds. It was the sound of shooting. At the same time, there was an arrogant voice. "Buggy, come out, I know you won't die like this. Buggy. It's Roger. He's here." Buggy's eyes shrank at this time, and the word fear was written in his eyes. He looked in the direction of the gunshot and could not help but take a step back. "It's faster than I thought." Song Howren narrowed his eyes and walked towards the direction of the gunshot. "Wait, what do you want to do?" However, the injured bodyguard beside Mr. Billy could not help but frown and say, "At this time, we should not fight with the other party. We should go this way." He pointed to the other side of the corridor in the opposite direction. Song Howren said faintly, "When you want to block a person, will you blatantly tell others that you are there?" The bodyguard was startled and frowned. "You mean, he deliberately told us the location so that we would retreat and go to the other side, and then ambush us? Then can you follow me now?" Song Howren smiled. But the bodyguard still hesitated. "This is just your guess. How can you be sure? What if he deliberately led us to think this way? We don't know how many people they have. Even if there is only a slight possibility, we can't put Mr. Billy in danger." "In fact, you are already in danger," Song Howren said indifferently. "Opportunity waits for no one. If you miss it, you will miss it. So I don't intend to waste time here to persuade you. Whether you want to follow me or not is up to you. Mr. Billy? We might be able to climb from the VIP box to the next floor," another bodyguard suddenly suggested. Oni snorted disdainfully and said with a sneer, "Fine, go ahead and crawl. There are at least 7 or 8 guns waiting for you in the concert hall. If you can't hit such an obvious target, you must be blind. Your bodyguard hasn't graduated yet, right?" "You!" "Enough," Mr. Billy shouted at this time, and then looked at Song Howren and said seriously, "I will trust you this time. I will follow you." "I like your courage." Song Howren sincerely sighed. Big shots naturally cherish their own feathers more, but this Mr. Billy's courage was different from the others. Mr. Billy bitterly smiled. You definitely won't go this way. My bodyguard and I are exhausted. If we encounter the bandits again, we won't be able to deal with them. Besides, it's not good for us to scatter now. Young man, I hope your judgment won't push me into the fire pit. I also hope that I will have the opportunity to repay you in the future, and not resent you in the afterlife. If Mr. Billy can take care of my business in the future, that will be enough. Song Howren smiled evilly, looking relaxed. Nevertheless, he still took the P-90 that he had just captured from Oni. Leader, do you think they will rush to our side? A brawny man showed a grim smile, and his finger was always on the trigger of the gun, aiming at the end of the corridor, waiting for the prey to appear. The person lying in ambush on the other side is Brother Ming. No matter where the big fish goes, they can't escape. Roger sneered. I have to go back in 10 minutes. Leader, there seems to be movement. Wait, don't shoot. But they heard a frightened cry. The person who appeared in the corridor was Buggy. Buggy's face was a bit ugly at this time. His face and clothes were covered with dark red sticky liquid. He looked like a bloody man. Roger, it's me, don't shoot. Buggy raised his hands and walked toward Roger with trembling legs. Roger, with a total of 3 men. He looked at Buggy coldly, as if he was thinking about something, and suddenly said, They are behind you? Roger, don't shoot. Buggy nodded nervously, and at the same time, he tilted his head back, revealing the person behind him. It was Song Howren. He aimed the P-90 behind Buggy, and his eyes finally met Roger's as Buggy moved. Roger, don't shoot. The atmosphere fell into a strange silence, and only Buggy's trembling voice sounded. Bucky, on the other hand, slowly walked towards Roger and the others. Song Howren, on the other hand, maintained a distance of less than 2 feet from Bucky. Using Bucky as a shield, he also slowly moved forward. I don't like being threatened by the enemy. When the 2 sides were less than 5 meters away, Roger suddenly snorted coldly. At the same time, there was a clicking sound. It was the sound of a gun being loaded. But I just want to get out of here safely. Song Howren gritted his teeth and looked nervous. There are so many hostages down there. It doesn't matter if I'm there or not. I just want to get out of here. This person is very important to you, right? Don't lose this guy for my cheap life. Roger narrowed his eyes and suddenly asked, Are you Billy's bodyguard? Song Howren nodded. Mr. Billy was shot and is now hiding in the water bar on the 3rd floor. You can ask someone to find him. Roger sneered. Betraying your employer, you really don't seem to be a qualified bodyguard. Song Howren said indifferently, No matter how much you earn, what's the use if you don't have the life to enjoy it? Staying alive is the most important. So, as long as you get out of the way and let me get out of here safely, I promise I won't touch a hair on this guy's head. Otherwise, he showed an extremely ferocious expression and said bitterly, Otherwise, I'll die with him. Roger's eyes were still gloomy. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Song Howren, but suddenly picked up the walkie-talkie. Brother Ming, Big Fish is in the water bar on the 3rd floor, go and take a look. Brother Ming, reply if you receive, over. Cha-cha. The walkie-talkie sounded like an electric current. Leader. Brother Ming, fired at us. Heed is a mole. Hearing the voice from the walkie-talkie, Roger's face suddenly changed. He was stunned on the spot, as if he couldn't digest the news for a while. At the same time, in the entire concert hall, the entire theater, all the light sources stopped in an instant. The main power seemed to have been cut off. Bang bang, bang bang, bang bang. Leader, the police suddenly attacked. They know the location of our ambush. Leader. In the darkness, another voice sounded from the walkie-talkie. The moment the lights completely disappeared, Buggy instinctively crouched down. Because at the moment the lights went out, Song Howren and Roger's men began to fight at the same time. Chapter 792. becoming an overlord, sitting on a large region, hundreds of subordinates, and hundreds of guns and ammunition. He deserved to be a local emperor, okay? Of course, it was good, but this was not ancient times. The chaotic situation would eventually be eliminated, and the old era would always be defeated by the wishes of the masses. From a long time ago, or rather, since he was still in the imperial capital headquarters, Ming had already known that this was a road of no return. Even a behemoth like the imperial capital headquarters was ultimately defeated by the state apparatus. However, although the country was still in a chaotic situation because of historical problems, history was ultimately deduced by people. Ming didn't want to become a person eliminated by history, and he didn't want to be restricted by the state system. So, he would become the rule maker. Enlistment. This was a good opportunity. Although it happened suddenly, Ming keenly captured the opportunity to change his life. Years of prison life had already changed Ming a lot. In prison, he was not disturbed by anyone. When he was really quiet, he could think about the future. For a big shot at his level, going to prison did not mean losing everything. Buggy, the coward, could also live like a member of the royal family in another prison. This country had already become so corrupt. In a few years, in prison, Ming self-taught a lot of knowledge and even got several degrees. He began to plan another way out of life. He was born a smart person. When he was a child, he grew up in a wealthy family and even had an official background. It was just that his family became a victim in the political struggle of the country. This time, Roger's request gave the country a big headache, and Ming knew that his opportunity had come. Although he was in prison, the crime was not serious. The real felony had been taken on by him as a scapegoat, so he was only sentenced to 13 years in prison at first. This time, he agreed to be an official mole, so he was pardoned for the rest of the sentence. Mr. Minister of Security, your Senate President is currently taken away by Crocodile. This should be a good opportunity for you. The location is. In addition, I will directly clear the blockade of the gate for you. Brother Ming turned off the communicator that he carried with him and wiped the blood off his face. The subordinates that Roger asked him to bring with him to ambush Billy's group had all fallen. It was very easy to get rid of these fellows who were full of respect and admiration for his past deed. Even Moria, who used to work together with him, fell in a pool of blood at this time, with confusion in his eyes. He died without knowing why. Before they died, they probably never thought that such a vicious and evil person would actually become the government's lackey. Well, Brother Ming didn't like the term lackey, or it should be called collaborator. However, there was a small mistake. That was, there was actually a guy who was not dead and had informed Roger in time. However, it didn't matter anymore. As long as the police's special operations team took action, they would naturally take care of the bandits in the concert hall at an extremely fast speed. The biggest problem was the detonator in Roger's hand. However, Brother Ming did not think that Roger would have the idea of dying together with the enemy. After all, this was a ruthless person who was willing to betray his own father in order to survive. Perhaps after washing away his identity as a gang leader, it would be a good choice to appear with another identity. The funds he transferred before he went to prison were quite sufficient. Then, how about becoming a senator and then a politician? But Roger actually mastered that kind of thing. Ming sneered. Let me take this kind of thing. Of course, he did not report some of his conversations with Roger. Ming laughed strangely and moved forward in the darkness, but his steps were light as if he was walking on a sunny road. A few minutes before the power went out, listening to the screams in the room, the gangster who followed Roger's order to Crocodile yawned in boredom, lit a cigarette and smoked comfortably. Boss Crocodile had always been famous for his cruelty and liked to torture and kill. Although the old man was not killed by the leader, when he came out, he was afraid that he would be hanging on by his last breath. Inside the room, just as the bandits outside had thought, The head of the Senate was already drenched in cold sweat, and his face was bruised and swollen. At this time, Crocodile pulled the old man's tie with one hand, making him grasp his collar in pain and struggle. Seeing the old man's painful expression, Crocodile grinned. "Dear Uncle Bervold, you never thought that you would fall into my hands one day, did you?" "Crocodile, don't make mistakes. Make mistakes again," the old man begged with difficulty. "Uncle, since you married into the Capedon family, you have tried to distance yourself from us poor relatives. The Capedon family does value you and even pushed you all the way to the position of senator. But uncle, aren't you a bit too ruthless?" Crocodile pressed the old senator's head against the wall. "But it doesn't matter. I don't intend to let people know that my uncle is you. Otherwise, after this release, the government may be interested in talking to me." Bervold saw stars and felt dizzy, but he suddenly felt a sense of regret. If he had not completely concealed his relationship with Crocodile since he came to power, and let the government know some of it, maybe he would not be in such a dangerous situation now? Unfortunately, no matter how regretful you are, it's too late. Crocodile grinned. "In less than 10 minutes, I will throw your body out, as Roger said. Dear Uncle Bervold, let me call you for the last time." He kicked Bervold's stomach hard, making Bervold spit out red and white turbid things, and his body twitched because of the pain. "Crocodile, my dear nephew, let me go. I don't have a long time to live." Bervold grasped Crocodile's trousers with difficulty, raised his head, and begged, I can give you all my wealth." He knew Crocodile's hatred for him. If it was another person, he would at least have a trace of confidence and would not beg bitterly. Crocodile directly stepped on Bervold's palm, as if breaking his finger bones, and then snorted, "How much wealth of the Capedon family can you control? I may not have less wealth than you, and I can even create more in the future. This country's prison exists in name only for me. Don't you know how much my wealth has increased over the past few years? Why did you ask me to hide behind the scenes? Idiot! I've been waiting for 20 years to kill you. 8 minutes. It's the first time I feel that time is so long." Looking at Crocodile's playful smile, Bervold was desperate. In the last few minutes of life, the joys, sorrows, and spicy came one after another. He had been seriously injured, and his body was already old. How could he bear it? Perhaps his internal organs had already been ruptured. Bervold only felt that everything in front of him became dim. Perhaps this was the moment of his death. The door of the room seemed to suddenly open, and someone rushed in, saying something to Crocodile. After hearing it, Crocodile did not seem to have any hesitation, and directly grabbed a pistol from that person's hand, and directly pointed it at his forehead. He even felt the cold breath of the muzzle. "God, I don't want to die like this, even if I have to sacrifice my soul, I beg you." Narrowing his eyes, Bervold only felt that his eyelids were extremely heavy, and he gradually lost consciousness, as if waiting for him was an eternal darkness. The fire of life was weak like a candle in the wind, gradually extinguishing. "Sir, the survival you requested has been delivered." It was a woman's voice. "Enjoy the rest of your life. Although it's not much, I hope you can enjoy your old age. When it's over, please allow us to come and take your soul." The voice spiraled away like a dream. Bervold slowly opened his eyes, and seemed to feel that the pain in his body was much better. Although he was still very weak, he could open his eyes, and even recovered a lot of strength. But there was still darkness in front of him. But at this moment, the door of the room was opened again. It seemed to be kicked open. 4 fully armed and masked police troops rushed in at the same time. The strong lights installed on the guns illuminated the scene in the room, and Bervold also saw the situation in front of him. Crocodile had fallen to the ground, together with a criminal. What happened? Bervold's mind wasn't completely blank. He could at least tell that the fall of Crocodile and the criminals happened before the special forces broke in. How infuriating! Bervold suddenly felt angry. Why couldn't these incompetent guys appear in time? At that moment, Crocodile really wanted to kill himself if he didn't suddenly fall down. But who shot him? 2 living people had fallen down without a sound? Calling the headquarters, the head of the Senate has been successfully rescued. Calling the headquarters, the head of the Senate has been successfully rescued, and the criminal crocodile has been captured. Roger. Now, please immediately protect the head of the Senate and evacuate from the safe route, no mistakes. Roger. Bervold's face was gloomy as he watched 2 special forces take the fainted crocodile and the criminal away, and he followed the last special force and left quickly. Before you came in, did you see anyone or hear anything? Bervold suddenly asked. His voice was as oppressive as a beast in the corridor without light due to the power outage. No. The special force didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of the real big shot of the country. He respectfully said, "When we came in, we saw the same scene as when you saw us coming in." Bervold rubbed his forehead. "Enjoy the rest of your life. Although it's not much, I hope you can enjoy your old age in peace. When it's over, please allow us to come and take your soul as a reward." That voice seemed to be engraved in the bottom of his heart. Once again, it was a cold female voice. Bervold followed the special force and left quickly. He also intermittently heard the news about the scene from the communications of the Storm Squad members. The hidden outposts of the criminals have been cleaned up, starting to attack the concert hall. Shoot the target as soon as possible. Action. Something unusual happened. Report. All the criminals in the concert hall are unconscious. Before we arrived? Report the number of remaining criminals. Report the location of Roger, Moria, Bucky, and others. Roger has a detonator in his hand. Another mysterious coma? Bervold deeply frowned. But at this time, he had been tied with a belt and a steel cable. The Storm Squad members had sent him to the rooftop of the theater and were ready to send him out from there. The helicopter was on it. The gunshots sounded and stopped, and then suddenly sounded again. There were collisions and furious cries. After a few times, Bucky just held his head in panic and squatted on the edge of the wall. The gunshots didn't sound for a long time. In the darkness, Song Howren's voice sounded faintly. "Mr. Billy, follow me." The police seemed to have started to act. The sound of running could be heard. In the midst of the chaos, someone could be heard saying, "Quick, quick! Wait for me." Bucky quickly stood up. But it was dark all around. There were 2 ends of the corridor, and he didn't know which one to go to, but at this time, the lighting system of the theater suddenly recovered. It was as bright as day, and Bucky's eyes suddenly felt a little painful. But he saw that beside him, 3 of Roger's men fell directly in a pool of blood, and Roger also fell to the wall with his head down, holding a dagger in his hand with blood on it. At the same time, at least 3 bullet wounds could be seen on his chest. Song Howren and others were just in front of him, about 7 or 8 meters away. A bodyguard's shoulder was dyed red, and Luvia also covered her arm. Song Howren didn't know when a bleeding scar appeared on the back of his hand. It seemed that in the short time of the power outage, the 2 sides had an extremely dangerous fight. "You didn't die? Forget it, keep up." Song Howren looked back and glanced at Bucky. What a lucky guy. Bucky smiled bitterly and quickly got up. But at this moment, he glanced at Roger from the corner of his eyes, and suddenly his body tensed up. Roger suddenly looked up, his eyes like a ghost, looking at him. He was seriously injured, but he didn't die. "Bucky, you betrayed me." Roger showed a cold smile. "Not dead yet? You're really tough." Not far away, Song Howren shook his head, took a pistol from Luvia's hand, and quickly aimed at Roger's head. At a distance of less than 10 meters, he naturally wouldn't miss. But Roger quickly took something out of his tactical waist bag, and then suddenly stabbed it at his neck. Song Howren couldn't see what it was. But Bucky saw very clearly that it was a syringe, and it seemed to contain a dark blue liquid. Chapter 793. The bullet, in the rifled barrel, broke through the darkness and disappeared in a flash. The bullet, which had reached the subsonic speed, directly penetrated Roger's head. It's over, Song Howren thought. Military advisor? This guy is still. Luvia's words made Song Howren frown. After Roger's head was shot, his reaction seemed a little strange. To be precise, Roger's body suddenly became a little strange. Blood vessels. The blood vessels on Roger's body began to swell, one by one, pulsating under his skin. It was even possible to see the contraction of the blood as it surged. He's not dead? Roger's throat was producing a strange sound. It was very stifling. It was a scream, a low roar when enduring some kind of extreme pain. He should be dead. The probability of surviving a bullet piercing through the brain was 1 in 100 million. Song Howren naturally did not think that Roger was that lucky 1 in 100 million. All signs pointed to the strange changes in Roger's body at this time. His muscles began to grow, like a Frankenstein monster. It was a level that made the world's bodybuilders flinch. Even Roger's skin began to turn light blue at this time. Green, no, blue giant? Oni looked at this scene in a daze. He only felt a chill go straight to the top of his head, and his scalp went numb. But he suddenly felt that his hand was empty. It turned out that the P90 in his hand was directly taken away by Song Howren. Song Howren did not hesitate at all for the mutated Roger. He directly swept the P90, a 50-bullet submachine gun, with the P90. Mysterious. He had experienced it before, and now he even had a mysterious item on him. Therefore, Song Howren was able to wake up in the first place. God knows what kind of consequences this guy's body will bring after such a strange change is completed. Although he did not know the reason for this strange change, in Song Howren's opinion, who would foolishly watch the enemy complete the transformation? Of course, he should take advantage of the opponent's transformation to directly interrupt and kill this guy. Tap tap, tap tap, tap tap. Song Howren's finger tightened on the trigger of the P90. 3 bullets, 10 bullets, 20 bullets. Even after a full magazine was emptied, Song Howren did not stop. His movements were as fast as lightning as he reloaded the magazine, followed by a new round of frenzied fire. A full minute later, almost 2 minutes later, 100 bullets hit Roger, turning his body into a beehive. Countless mutated blue blood flowed out of Roger's body, and the wall behind him was densely filled with bullet marks. With the loss of a large amount of blood, Roger's body instantly shrank from swelling to shrinking. It was as if some of the essence in his body had been squeezed out. His shriveled appearance was almost reminiscent of prisoners who died of illness in prison. If Roger could speak at this moment, he would probably roar, so angry. The drug that he kept for the last time to turn the tables came from a mysterious force. He had fled in Russia for many years, and after several rounds of turnover, he became a quasi-cadre of this organization. Now, if Roger could successfully stir up a storm in this country and become the source of chaos, he would be able to become a senior member of this organization and come into contact with an even larger and more mysterious world. How could he not be angry? Let's die together. He felt the rapid loss of his life. With the last bit of strength left, Roger put his hand into his trouser pocket. Oh no! His detonator! Song Howren's expression changed dramatically at this time. Hearing his shout, everyone suddenly lost consciousness. Song Howren naturally mentioned that Roger had buried a large number of explosives in the theater. Their consciousness went blank because they felt the arrival of death. Without saying a word, Song Howren rushed to Roger's side and pulled out Roger's arm from under his stiff and strange smile. This guy was probably dead by now, but his hand was tightly grasping a small remote control. The bright red circular button had been pressed long ago. Song Howren could hear the rapid beeping sound like a countdown timer. Damn it, if I had known that when the power was restored, I would have found the detonator when I saw Roger, who was paralyzed and unconscious. But at that time, he had considered that since Roger was dead, there was no need to touch this thing. Next, he would let the police, who had broken in, deal with it. This would save him a lot of trouble. Moreover, Billy and the others were also present. It would be inconvenient for them to see him take this thing. But he did not expect that Roger was still alive and even had the chance to turn the tables. If he had not decisively fired 2 clips of bullets. However, this was not the time to regret. His brain experienced regret, anger, and panic in an instant, and he calmed down. Song Howren could only shout, "Everyone, get down!" This was a device that could explode in an instant. Naturally, it was too late to move. So, they could only lie on the ground. Whether they lived or died, they could only resign themselves to fate. For the first time, Song Howren left his fate to luck. Bang bang! The air seemed to be frozen. Everyone lying on the ground could only hear a series of sound. However, this sound was far beyond everyone's imagination. This sound was just like someone hitting the wall with a hammer. Even the slightest vibration could not be felt. Only the detonator made a long buzzing sound at this time. Song Howren knew that this was the result of the explosion of the bomb. Military counselor? Luvia was still in shock and looked at Song Howren. Buggy was lying on the ground, holding his head with both hands. At this time, his chin was on the floor. He looked around with a confused expression. Song Howren frowned and said, "It's true that there were bombs, but they weren't as powerful as we thought. Roger lied to everyone." This young Roger? Buggy subconsciously looked at Roger. His intuition told him that Roger was the kind of person who would really install a strong bomb. "Let's not talk about it first. We have to leave this place quickly." Song Howren quickly got up. "Mr. Billy, the leader of the gangsters, Roger, is dead. I guess now the police are likely to have controlled the scene. We are basically in a safe state now." "That's good." Mr. Billy heaved a long sigh. At this time, a series of footsteps came quickly. They could even hear shouts such as, "The gunshots came from here," and "Hurry up, it may be the gangsters." They should have heard Song Howren's crazy gunshots and hurried to rescue them. Song Howren said decisively, "Mr. Billy, it's up to you now." But Mr. Billy suddenly fell to the ground at this time. Everyone was shocked. 2 bodyguards quickly helped Billy up. They took off his coat and found that Billy's waist was dyed red at this time. Did he get shot when they were fighting in the dark? I can still hold on." Mr. Billy was still conscious. Cold sweat dripped down his pale face, as if he would faint at any time. The moment he closed his eyes he insisted, "Help them, a bit." The bodyguard nodded. Then, he turned to Song Howren and the other 2 and nodded. Although he still did not know the identity and origin of these 3 people, if it were not for them, the result might have been different. Undoubtedly, his master, Billy, was a person who knew how to repay kindness. Back then, it was because he admired Billy's spirit that he followed Mr. Billy all the time. "Don't worry, I know how to tell the police," the bodyguard quickly said. "After that, you can take advantage of the chaos to leave. We will keep what happened today a secret." Song Howren nodded. He directly threw away all the weapons in his hands and walked together with Luvia, pretending to be innocent. Buggy took a long breath and sighed in his heart. "This time, I should be able to go back to prison, right?" At this time, Buggy walked in front of Roger and sighed. He reached out and wiped Roger's open eyes. He said somewhat sadly, "Roger, don't blame me. You also wanted to kill me. I was just protecting myself. In the future, I will apply to the prison to come out and pay my respects to you. Don't worry, I am very familiar with the prison warden. Every year, I will be on time to visit your grave." Buggy shook his head and was about to leave when he saw a black rope around Roger's neck. Out of curiosity, he pulled it and found that it was a short silver key. Without thinking, Buggy tore the thing off. Song Howren curiously asked, "What is that?" Buggy shook his head and said, "I don't know. I just want to keep a memento. If you want it, I will give it to you." After that, Buggy indifferently threw the necklace directly to Song Hauran. Song Hauran raised his hand and caught it. He looked at it carefully, but could not see what it was. He glanced at Buggy again, but saw that Buggy was still looking at Roger's body in a daze. He shook his head and threw the key back. "No, you can keep it as a memento." Buggy did not think much about it. He took it and stuffed it into the bag. At this time, a group of police rescue team rushed over. Buggy raised his hands in a very straightforward manner, as if to say, "I surrender. Don't hit me, just send me to prison." Song Hauran did not know whether to laugh or cry. The bodyguard hurriedly said, "We fought with the criminals and killed them. In addition, this is Mr. Billy. He was shot. Hurry and send him to the hospital." Mr. Billy. This was a big shot. The group of Storm Squad naturally panicked and hurriedly called the medical staff. Song Hauran and the others also followed behind the two bodyguard. Under the escort of a group of Storm Squad, they safely left. It seems that the situation has been completely under control. Their actions were fast enough. It had been less than 10 minutes since the power was suddenly cut off. It could be said that it was a race against time. Brother Ming walked alone in the cloister. After clearing the hidden sentries at the door so that the police could smoothly attack, he pulled out and searched for Roger. He had also heard the sound of frantic gunfire. Suspicious, he followed the sound to find the source. But when he came to the cloister where the shooting happened, only the bodies of Roger and several criminals were left. Roger's body even made Brother Ming feel unreal. Not to mention the terrible bullet marks on his body, Roger's withered appearance at this time made Brother Ming feel frightened. If it were not for the clothes and Roger's iconic long curly hair, Brother Ming even thought that he had recognized the wrong person. But Brother Ming did not think much. Time waits for no one. He quickly squatted down and looked for something on Roger's body. However, not long after, Brother Ming frowned, shocked and angry. The activation key of that thing. Who took it away? Damn it. Brother Ming took a deep breath. The key may have been lost, or it may have been hidden by Roger somewhere. Maybe it was still somewhere in the theater. As for the possibility of it being taken away, when talking about this matter, he deliberately turned off the special communication equipment of the police. The only people who knew about it were himself, Roger, Moria, and Crocodile. Moria was killed by him, and Roger was dead. So, only Crocodile was left. But he kept a special communication with the police along the way and knew that Crocodile had been arrested early. It seemed that Roger had hidden it in advance. But where would it be hidden in the theater? Brother Ming took a deep breath and simply destroyed the information about the nuclear bomb that Roger carried. Naturally, it was best for him to know this kind of thing. And at this time, there are still people over there. Who? Come out. 2 policemen ran over with guns. Brother Ming stood up directly, sorted out his emotions, and put down his weapon. He raised his hand and said, "Don't shoot. Ask your security minister who I am." The bodies of the dead bandits were naturally dealt with by another group of staff. Now was the critical time to search for any remaining bandits and whether there were other dangers in the theater. As for a large number of hostages held in the concert hall, they slowly walked out of the theater under the guidance of dozens of police officers. Many of them even shed tears of excitement. The hostage situation in the municipal theater that had lasted for several hours seemed to be coming to an end. However, in the quiet corridor, a beautiful figure slowly walked over to Roger's corpse. She looked down. "Master is very interested in your soul. Although it is not a trade item, it is good as a collection." Her white fingers stretched out. From Roger's body, a black ink-like sphere slowly floated out and finally fell into her white palm. "It's still fresh. Very fresh. Like getting a new toy." On the roof of the building opposite the theater, Boss Luo held the black light sphere handed over by Miss Servant Girl and looked at it with interest. "It's as quiet as the night," Luochu whispered. "Rainbow soul spheres are rare, and so are the dark ones. Unfortunately, it is not a trade item. Miss Servant Girl felt a little pity. After assisting the club for many years, Miss Servant Girl also understood some of the rules of contribution. A magnificent soul sphere could give a good reward to the owner, so the value of the evil one was almost the same. Maybe it can be a trade item. Luaccio thought for a while. I think it still has room for improvement. Master, are you going to help it reincarnate? Yu blinked curiously, then nodded and said, well, maybe after 10 years it will go further. So, let's put a mark on it. Miss Servant Girl was no stranger to this method. The former owner often used this method. As for the current owner, it seemed that this was the first time he tried this method. Time was almost meaningless to her. 10 years might pass by in the blink of an eye. But now, time had become active because it had a new master. Maybe the next 10 years would be very long. 10 years? Luaccio smiled and shook his head. It won't take that long. Don't we already have one? Yu was stunned and then thought of something. Master, do you mean that it will be born in Taiyinzi's game world? Boss Luo smiled and nodded. Didn't Taiyinzi say that he wanted to make a hero spirit creation plan? Since that's the case, let's really put in a Demon King in that world. Savior and Demon King, a very traditional RPG game. With a snap of his finger, the black ball disappeared. A what? A new soul was born? Taiyinzi was so anxious that he quickly got up from the armchair and put down the coconut that he had just drunk. Then he took off his sunglasses and beach clothes. A white light flashed on his body, and he looked like an immortal. Then the surrounding scenery changed. Immortal chi rose in spirals, and then a white light beam fell. My name is Taiyin, and I am. This guy is going to be reincarnated as a demon? Taiyinzi, who was about to give an opening speech, was stunned. He looked as if he had eaten a cockroach, but if he was the master of this world, then the one who gave him the order was at a higher level, his master. But it doesn't seem like he wants to be reincarnated as a demon? Taiyinzi rubbed his chin. A figure walked out of the light beam. His eyes were blank for a moment, but they soon became clear. Then he looked at the strange Taiyinzi warily. He realized that he was not wearing any clothes and was unarmed. But he could deal with such a weak old man with his physical strength. He should be fighting with someone in the theater and even using his last resort. How did he suddenly come to such a strange place? But the feeling of being alive was not wrong. Old man, where is this place? Give me clothes and food. I'm hungry. Oh? How dare you be rude to me? Old Taoist. This deity has transformed so many descenders, but you are the most arrogant one? Get lost and become a slime. Let's call him Stone Lime too. In this world, although Slime was not a pure-blood demon, strictly speaking, they were slaves and servants of the demon race. They were considered part of the demon race. Yes, so there was no problem. Taiyinzi waved his hand and swept the surprised man out of his secret realm with a look of disgust. Then he acted as if nothing had happened and put on his previous clothes. He took a sip of the coconut. Chapter 794. The traffic in the city began to gradually recover, but the blockade of the theater had not been lifted yet. Now the police were once again investigating the theater for danger, collecting evidence, and cleaning up the scene. These follow-up operations were naturally left to the second-line personnel to handle. The storm team, the riot team, and the like had already received orders and began to evacuate. The corpses of the bandits began to be packed in bags, then moved out one by one, and finally sent to a special transport vehicle. The captain had just ordered a newly delivered corpse. It was said to be a wanted criminal? But wasn't he already dead? The captain shook his head and watched the people continue to move the corpses into the theater. His son leaned against the front of the car and began to smoke and chat with his colleague. Because of the captain's negligence at this time, he did not notice that in the dark night, a black shadow quietly sneaked into the car full of corpses. In the darkness, the person's appearance could not be seen clearly, but it seemed to be unable to stop the black shadow's movements in the car. The sound of a zipper being opened, When the bag was opened, what appeared was clearly a shriveled corpse. The corpse's body was also covered with blue liquid or blood. This was obviously Roger's corpse. The black shadow took out two things from its arms. One was a strange spray, and the other was a small syringe filled with silver liquid. It sprayed the spray on Roger's body, and in an instant, the blue blood returned to dark red. Then, it injected the syringe into Roger's heart until the silver liquid was completely injected, and then it pressed its palm on Roger's chest. In the darkness, the palm emitted a faint light. At this moment, Roger's body seemed to have been hit by a strong electric shock, and suddenly bounced. Again and again. After a few rounds, it finally retracted its hand. When Roger's corpse was delivered, it looked very horrible. His body was completely shriveled, and the blood vessels turned blue one by one. It looked very strange. However, after a few manipulations, all of this disappeared. Although the corpse was still shriveled, nothing valuable could be found. The corpse was not destroyed, but the traces were destroyed. The cleaning task is completed, the key search failed, the soul collection task failed, the soul in the target's body is gone, presumably collapsed. Its voice rang out in the darkness. It was surprisingly tender. Another voice slowly rang in its ears. Collapse? Luo Jie's soul should be a demon spirit, so it should not be that easily dispersed. Could it be that Paradise Island had made a mistake in their assessment? The key is missing? This is a bit troublesome, but only the key was not used. After all, the activator is in our hands. Forget it, leave immediately and wait for the next mission. We have a few people like Roger in this country. Yes, it knew that according to Paradise Island, there were two types of souls in this world. The holy spirits that were real and the false spirits that were fake. As for the real holy spirits, due to falling into darkness, they would transform into demon spirit. However, they were still evolved from holy spirit. The place where they were born, Paradise Island, had an organization that specialized in evaluating them. Of course, this organization's evaluation may not be 100% accurate. In the past, the success rate was about 67.8%, so it was not surprising that the evaluation was wrong. It didn't feel anything about the fact that Roger wasn't a demonic spirit. In fact, it even felt a little more relaxed because the recovery and preservation of demonic spirits or holy spirits required a lot of effort. Now that it was easy to leave, it was naturally the best. Special Affairs Team, Number 03, evacuate, it said in a low voice. Then, it disappeared into the darkness as if it had never been there. Then, a new body was carried over, and the coach started to load things again. Mr. Billy was shot and fainted? Outside the theater, Dr. Frankie, who was waiting here, heard the news and his expression changed slightly. This was told by Mr. Billy's bodyguard himself, so there was no mistake. Doctor, Mr. Billy has been sent to the hospital's operating room as soon as possible. I'll ask someone to send you home. The bodyguard seemed to be a little indifferent to Dr. Frankie. In fact, he was also injured, but he didn't treat Dr. Frankie immediately. Instead, he arranged for Dr. Frankie to take care of him, which was already very benevolent. Then, when will he wake up? Dr. Frankie looked around and said in a low voice, "This time, our discussion with Leiden Corporation, Doctor." The bodyguard's voice suddenly deepened, as if he was angry, but he suppressed it. "I understand your dedication to the satellite launch, but please understand Mr. Billy's current situation. We'll talk about this after Mr. Billy wakes up. Also, those guests from Leiden Company seem to have left, so I'm afraid they have some opinions about this negotiation. The conditions we discussed before may be a little different. If they change their conditions or ask for too much, Doctor, you better be mentally prepared. After all, we have limited resources here." I understand. Then, can I wait at the hospital until Mr. Billy wakes up?" "No need, I'll ask someone to send you home. Also, I need to go for treatment, Doctor. Goodbye." Dr. Frankie sighed. Seeing the bodyguard leave, he could only helplessly leave with another driver who had just arrived. "Doctor, are you going home?" This wasn't the first time the driver had sent Dr. Frankie, so his tone was still quite relaxed as he asked with a smile. Dr. Frankie shook his head and muttered, "No need, send me back to the laboratory of the university, there are still some data that I want to see." The driver complimented, "Doctor, you're really a great man." Dr. Frankie remained silent and simply closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, he seemed to see endless flames, and everything was destroyed in an instant. Defeated, he knelt down alone at the scene of the explosion, and everything turned into nothingness. An old man came to the command vehicle outside the street. He was the head of the Parliament, Burvold. The head of the Ministry of Security was a bit cautious at this time. This old man held too much power, and his family also had a terrifying influence on the country. For a person like him who had worked hard all the way, even if he had the capital to resist, he still needed to cherish his own feathers. "Senator, it's our fault that Roger hijacked the theater this time. We didn't do enough intelligence work, and we've frightened you. When I get back, I'll reorganize the department and get rid of all those lazy people." The head of the Ministry of Security knew that this was the only thing he could say, which was useless but could at least show his apology. "Where are the President and the others?" Burvold sat down with the help of others and asked indifferently. After the hostage incident was resolved, Mr. President and the cabinet members went back as soon as possible. The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly said, "After all, it's not safe outside, and we don't know if there are any remnants of the bandits." "Did they go back or didn't come out at all?" Burvold asked abruptly. The head of the Ministry of Security hesitated for a while before saying, "Head of the Parliament, you're also injured. Should I arrange for someone to send you for examination right away?" Burvold snorted, "No need, I've already arranged for a family doctor. I'm here this time because I want to talk to you about something." The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly asked the other people in the command vehicle to leave, leaving only himself and the head of the Parliament. Then he said seriously, "Go ahead." Burvold stretched out two fingers, "Two things. First, Jose is dead, and the position of the chief of the Rio Police Department is vacant. I have several recommended candidates. You can evaluate them and see which one is suitable." The head of the Ministry of Security looked a little pale. In fact, before this old man came, several other big shots had sent him similar messages. "Is there a problem? Or, do you have your own candidates? If you already have, I won't recommend them." Burvold glanced at the head of the Ministry of Security kindly. No. The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly said, "The one who can be recommended by the head of the Parliament must be a rare talent. I'll think about it. So, what's the second thing?" Burvold squinted. "I heard that 4 extremely serious criminals were released this time. One of them is called Moria, right?" "He's already dead." Burvold said, "Why should we keep people like him who will bring great harm to society? It's just a sentence which means nothing to these people. So, it's better for him to die." "You're right." The head of the Ministry of Security nodded, having no objection to Burvold's statement. "But it's a pity that only one of them died." Burvold sighed and shook his head. "If the other 3 guys also died in this fight, it's actually a good thing for us." It was said that when the head of the Parliament was rescued, he was in the same room with Crocodile, and seemed to have been beaten up. It seemed that it was for revenge. The head of the Ministry of Security thought for a while, and quickly made a decision. He suddenly patted his head. "Oh, how could I forget this? I heard that Crocodile was also seriously injured. I'm afraid he can't be saved." "Really?" Burvold smiled, then stood up with his hands on his knees. "Oh, I fell down today, and I don't know where I fell. I have to go back and have a good look. Take care. By the way, only Crocodile can't be saved?" Burvold suddenly turned back and asked before getting off the car. The head of the Ministry of Security gritted his teeth. "It seems that Buggy is also one of them. As for Doflamingo..." In fact, this time it was him who helped us to complete the rescue work. Bervold looked at the head of the Ministry of Security meaningfully, then nodded and said indifferently, "I'm so old. I hope the Congress can work as usual next Monday." Take care. After Bervold left, the head of the Ministry of Security was relieved. Finally, this big Buddha was sent away. He shook his head and called the secretary who was waiting outside, whispering, "Deal with Crocodile and Buggy." The secretary nodded quickly, "Yes, sir." Sending the prisoners and sending them back were two completely different lineups. After all, the crisis had been solved. Even so, the transport van was still relatively secure, with police cars guarding the front and back. But of course, it couldn't be compared with the armed helicopters at the beginning. But the military naturally wouldn't casually transfer them. There were too many factors involved, so I won't go into details. In the prisoner van, Crocodile hadn't woken up yet. But even if he woke up, it would be useless because he was surrounded by heavily armed police officers. In addition, he was also put on a restraining suit, completely cutting off the possibility of struggling. The police car in front suddenly stopped, so did the entire convoy escorting the prisoners. It was a deserted area, because this was the road leading to the suburban prison. "Get off the van and smoke a cigarette. Take a rest," the driver suddenly suggested. Everyone agreed readily. There was only one guard left in the prisoner van. Seeing that everyone was chatting outside, he nodded, then took out a few packets of tissue, and then covered Crocodile's face layer by layer. Until all 4 packets of tissue were covered, he unscrewed the bottle of mineral water and slowly soaked the tissue. Crocodile, who was in a coma, suddenly woke up at this time, and then struggled to move his body, but he couldn't move. The restraining suit made his hands completely unable to free, and his body was pinned down. He made an angry sound in his throat. He first tried to break the wet tissue covering his face with his tongue, but the thickness of dozens of tissues made him helpless. His legs were struggling, and he was in extreme pain. However, the police officer held his body down tightly. Finally, Crocodile's legs stopped moving, without making a sound. After another 10 minutes, the police took the tissue away from Crocodile's face, and then pretended that nothing had happened. At this time, the driver came back and started again. The group went to the prison as usual. Bucky tried to build a good relationship with the people in the van, because he was too thirsty at the moment and wanted to get some water to drink. In addition, the escorts stared at him with dead fish eyes and didn't speak. This made Bucky, who always liked to be lively, feel that he was going to be moldy. "Hey, are you new here? Why haven't I seen you before?" Bucky looked at the young man next to him. The prison van was sent by the prison he was originally in. He even knew the person driving the van. However, the prison guard next to him seemed to be a stranger. Speaking of which, other than this guard, he did not seem to have any impression of the others. "Yes, is there a problem?" The prison guard then responded. Bucky shrugged and said, "Listen, when you go back, arrange hot water for me immediately. I want to take a bath and have a midnight snack, otherwise I won't be able to sleep. Also, let Pauline come to my room tonight." "Who's Pauline?" the prison guard asked curiously. Bucky said casually, "She's the secretary of the prison warden's office, don't you know?" The prison guard didn't speak, just frowned. At this time, Bucky suddenly said, "Stop, stop. Cage, stop the car. Do you hear me?" The driver looked back through the iron fence. "Boss Bucky, we'll be back to the prison in half an hour. Why stop the car at this time?" "Shit. I need to pee." Bucky frowned and said, "I just remembered that I wanted to go to the toilet in the theater, but I haven't gone yet. No, I can't stand it anymore. Stop the car, or I won't be able to control myself." "Boss Bucky, can't you bear it? After all, we're almost there." The driver tried hard. Bucky said fiercely, "Do you want to die? I'm about to pee. Cage, I'm telling you, if you don't stop and let me wet my pants, you'll pack up and get out of here." Don't even think about getting your pension. It's not easy to stop the car. Cage looked at the prison guards in the prison van with an awkward expression. The prison guard said indifferently, "Then let him take care of it, otherwise he'll dirty the place." "All right then." The prison van stopped on the side of the road. As soon as the van stopped, Bucky hurriedly ran out. His hands were only handcuffed, so it didn't affect him from unbuttoning his pants. Bucky looked around. It was a desolate place, with only an advertisement board on the side of the road. He shook his head and went straight to the billboard. He took out his weapon and prepared to pee, however, just as he was about to relieve himself, Bucky suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach. "Damn, did I eat something dirty when I was at the bar?" Bucky had to turn back because of the pain in his stomach. "Do you have any tissues, shit?" The moment he turned around, Bucky saw that the prison guard had pointed a pistol at his back at this time. He was so scared that he rolled on the ground without saying a word. He didn't care that the ground was just wet because of him. He rolled directly to the other side of the billboard. "Damn it!" The prison guard stamped his foot. It's just a second later. Why did this guy suddenly turn back? But it was not the time to be annoyed, so he quickly chased after Bucky with his men. When the few prison guards went around, they found that they could no longer see Bucky. However, the prison guards saw another figure quickly get on the prisoner van. "It's him." Bucky did run back to the prison van and was in the driver's seat. He looked at the panicked Coach Cage and quickly said, "Listen, Cage. I don't care if you want to kill me or not, but I can give you a chance. I have a lot of money. If I can get out of here safely, I can give you more money than you can spend in a lifetime. So run." Chapter 795. Song Howren popped a lozenge into his mouth to ease the dryness in his throat. Now that he was sitting in an ordinary black car parked by the roadside, Song Howren began to talk to his father, Song Tianyu. In short, he first reported what he experienced in the theater, and finally asked, "Speaking of which, Dad, how did you get the information about Roger hijacking the theater?" Although the information came a little late and was very passive, it was still better than nothing. At the very least, Song Howren was able to leave the concert hall early before the hijacking. Otherwise, he might not have been able to escape unscathed. The batch of bombs in Roger's hands was obtained from the Fire King. Song Tianyu, who was in the headquarters of Iris Flowers, knew that Song Howren was safe, and his tone was a lot more relaxed. He seemed to drink some water before continuing. Flame King was also curious about what Roger wanted to do, so he sent people to follow him. Later, he found out that his people buried the bombs in the theater in advance. "Maybe it's your luck, kid." During the day, Flame King came to me and asked me to help send a batch of goods to Malacca. Then we talked about this matter. Flame King's grandfather? It seems that the goddess of luck is really looking after me. Song Howren nodded. Flame King was a very old arms dealer in this continent. Iris Flowers had a lot of subordinates and needed a lot of ammunition. They had been in a cooperative relationship with Flame King for a long time. But soon, Song Howren was stunned. "Wait a minute, Dad. Does that mean that Roger really bought a lot of strong bombs?" Song Tianyu was puzzled. Flame King's goods have never been a problem. If he said that they were powerful enough, then they were powerful enough. Is there a problem? No. Song Howren shook his head. But in his heart, he was puzzled. If Roger really had this kind of bomb, why was it that when he pressed the detonator in the theater, it was all bark and no bite? Since Flame King's people secretly saw that Roger's subordinates had buried the bombs in the theater, then the bombs in the theater should be from Flame King. But looking at the situation after the explosion, the Flame Emperor probably wouldn't sell fake goods and ruin his reputation. And after Roger got the explosives, he should have at least checked the goods, right? Then, what exactly happened in the middle? Song Howren was puzzled. At this time, Luvia opened the door from the outside and sat in the car. "Military advisor, we're starting to implement the backup plan." Let's not talk about it for now, Song Howren said into the phone and ended the call. He then started the engine and drove away. At this time, in the trunk of this ordinary black car, there was a man tied up and placed there. The man was even blindfolded and gagged. He was motionless, probably knocked out. Obviously, this car was snatched at the last minute. As for the so-called backup plan, it was naturally a supplementary plan after the original assassination in the theater failed. Because of the kidnapping, the last person on the death list was still safe. Song Howren slammed on the accelerator and looked at the GPS in the car. At the same time, he pressed the Bluetooth headset in his ear and said indifferently, "Oni, 3rd Street bank location. Wait for the target to enter your line of sight in 10 minutes. I will create an opportunity for you. You only have one shot. Whether it succeeds or fails, evacuate immediately." Roger. Bucky was struggling to cut his handcuffs with the large scissors he found in the prison van's toolbox. As for Captain Cage, his heart was beating wildly as he stepped on the accelerator. There were several police cars following closely behind. Bucky was holding the phone by his neck. He had snatched the phone from Captain Cage. He said angrily, "Mark, why do your people want to kill me? How did I offend you?" Mark seems to be the warden's name? Cage took the time to look at Bucky, knowing that he couldn't interrupt this kind of conversation at all, but at the same time, he couldn't help but secretly regret. What the hell is wrong with my brain? Why did I help Bucky? Money. No matter how much money I have, I need to be alive to spend it. Mark. King, talk to me. Don't I pay you a salary every month? King eats so much of my money for nothing? It's written clearly in my account book. At worst we can break up. Bucky continued to roar. Bucky, don't be impulsive. Let me think about what to say. By the way, where are you now? Bucky looked around. On the way back to the prison. What? The other side seemed to be shocked. After a moment of silence, he hurriedly said, Bucky, don't come back. I'll tell you the truth. Someone above wants your life. I guess someone above wants to take this opportunity to get rid of you. It's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't protect myself. Then I can only King be shot into a hornet's nest? Bucky was so angry that he laughed and said, When you were eating me, you laughed like a pig's head. Someone wants to kill me, but no one says a word for me? In short, don't come back. Warden Mark said in a panic. There are people waiting for you in the prison. You go back to the city. I will give you a place to hide for a few days. This is all I can help you with. Shit. Bucky fiercely smashed the phone on the windshield in front of him, making Captain Cage's heart ache. My iPhone 7, Boss Bucky, what should we do now? Cage wanted to slam on the brakes. Should we just surrender? Bucky, on the other hand, picked up a knife from the toolbox and placed it on Cage's neck. Go back to the city. I'm going to hide and contact my men. After I leave Rio safely, I'll give you everything I promised you. Looking at Cage's bewildered eyes, Bucky snorted and said, How much money do I give you every month? So much that you can't even imagine it. But those guys, they eat from me but do nothing. You, on the other hand, are a friend in need. I will definitely repay you. So drive properly. Put away the tool knife first before talking about feelings, you bastard. Boss Bucky, are we going to the place that warden said to hide? Cage quickly asked. Go? Do you think I am stupid? Bucky sneered. Since that pig Mark betrayed me, he must be up to no good. I will only go to that place if my brain has a cramp. Then now we? Bucky suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, Who is in your family? Cage suddenly said nervously, My wife and children are not here. They are in the countryside. I live alone. But Boss Bucky, they will guess it, right? They will find someone to wait for us at my house, right? Then there is no other way. Bucky sighed, We can only go there. Where? Go to 9th Avenue first. I will tell you where to go when we get there. Bucky shook his head. With that, Bucky picked up the phone he had just thrown and dialed another number. "It's me. I was plotted against in Rio. I don't want to stay in prison anymore. Send a few people to pick me up." Cage could not hear what the person on the other side of the phone said. In the end, he only heard a rather happy sentence: "Boss, are you finally coming out? Our brothers have been waiting for a long time to do something big." Bucky did not say anything. He just quickly said, "I will be there before noon tomorrow," and then hung up the phone. Finally, he looked at Cage and patted him on the shoulder. But he still did not put away the tool knife. He encouraged him, "Cage, now is the time to show your driving skills. Didn't you always boast in front of me that the best car you did on Bread Mountain was 5 consecutive hairpin turns? You put away the tool knife first. Has Crocodile been dealt with? Very good." The head of the security department nodded, but the phone soon called him again. His happy mood suddenly turned bad. "Bucky escaped? What the hell are you doing?" He roared into the phone. "In short, I give you 2 hours to get rid of this guy. Otherwise, you all pack your bags and get the hell out of here." The head of the security department threw the phone on the table and sat down while rubbing his head. Although a large number of prisoners successfully escaped from prison every year in this country, even if those cats and dogs escaped, it had no impact on the overall situation. Anyway, the prison was always overcrowded. If there were fewer prisoners, they could even save on funds. But Bucky was different. He was a big crocodile that the operation a few years ago took a lot of manpower and material resources to catch. Although because of too many reasons, this big crocodile was only sentenced to more than 10 years in prison, at least he was controlled within the scope of surveillance. The battle strategy of the country's upper echelons against the slums was to disintegrate these poor and vicious people, and then slowly encroach on them. At this time, they absolutely could not allow problems to happen to the policy that they had worked so hard to achieve, and let the country return to the chaotic period of more than 10 years ago. Fortunately, Crocodile had been dealt with, so the head of the Senate should be accounted for. As for Bucky's problem, they could only deal with it later. The head of the security department summoned his secretary and then ordered, "In a while, call the head of the Senate's secretary and tell him about Crocodile. I'm going to the presidential palace now to explain what happened today." Got it. The secretary had been with the head of the security department for many years and had long understood his temperament. At this time, he quickly said, "Before you arrive, I will prepare the report summary." The head of the security department did not say much. He walked out of the command vehicle and then went to another car that was going to the presidential palace. But when he just got into the car, the secretary ran over from a distance with an anxious face and patted the window. The head of the security department frowned and opened the window. He looked at the secretary who was still holding the phone in his hand. "What happened?" At this time, the secretary said in horror, "Head, it's not good. The head of the Senate, he was shot on the way home." "What? Burvold, How did it happen? Tell me clearly." The head of the security department could not completely calm down. He just rolled down the window and stared at the secretary who had been with him for 10 years. The secretary could only say, "I don't know the details. It is said that when the head of the Senate's car passed by the 3rd Avenue Bank, a private car suddenly lost control and crashed into it. Then, the assassination happened at this time. According to the driver and the guard, there was an ambush in the distance." "What about the private car that lost control?" "There was no one in the car. It is presumed that they had jumped out before the crash. But the car owner was found tied up in the trunk. I'm afraid that the criminals temporarily hijacked the car, but whether it is or not still needs follow-up investigation." The head of the security department felt like his brain exploded. "What about the police? Why didn't the police open the way? It's too chaotic." The secretary said helplessly, "Wasn't Director Jose killed by criminals in the theater? Now, the police station was in a mess. It's not like you don't know that there are many factions in this bureau. Bang! The head of the security department punched the car door and kicked the front seat. His neat hair was messed up because of such a big movement. He clenched his fist and bit his knuckles. Suddenly, he remembered another piece of information in his chaotic mind. Before the hostage incident at the theater, there had been several assassinations in the city. Among these people, there were gang leaders, as well as influential people in the business and political world. Could there be some connection between them? But logically speaking, those who were already assassinated should not be connected. They did not know each other, so the intelligence department was in a deadlock. Could it be that the target of the assassins was actually only the head of the Senate? So everything before was just a smokescreen? No, there's no need for such a smokescreen. If the culprit's target was really the head of the Senate, then he would have been their first target. There's no need for them to kill anyone else. Instead, it would have attracted our attention. But are there any connections between these assassinations? The Minister of Security had two different thoughts in his head, and his mind was in a mess. Suddenly, the head of the security department felt a flash of lightning in his mind. The criminal actually wanted to do it in the theater long ago. It was only because of this hijacking incident that they didn't succeed. The private car that they snatched at the last minute might be proof. Minister, what do you mean? I want the list of all the guests in the theater tonight. The head of the security department rubbed his forehead. I want the information of all the staff in the theater. The criminal must be among them. I'll ask someone to prepare it right away. No, I'll do it myself. Drive, the presidential palace. No, I'll take the command car. The head of the security department thought for a while, and quickly got out of the car. He walked back to the modified commercial car with extremely thick internal armor. The traffic had recovered a little, but because of the large number of vehicles, the taxi was still driving slowly. Well, there's still a traffic jam. I don't know when I'll be able to go back. In the car, Caroline was on the phone with Livia. By the way, have you arrived at your gigolo's house? What gigolo? Arnold is the most ambitious man I've ever seen. Livia seemed to be a little dissatisfied with the words of her sister and landlord. Okay, a man with ambition, I get it. Caroline did not respond curiously. Her eyes looked at the densely packed cars outside the car window. She did not know when they would reach the end. Caroline, why don't you stay here tonight? Livia suggested, stay here for the night. The district is probably not safe now anyway. Who knows if you'll be in danger if you go back so late. I have a small room here. I'll help you tidy it up. Chapter 796. Cheers. Cheers. The wine glasses raised high in the air gently knocked against each other, making a crisp sound. The room was filled with the fragrance of wine. Oni lit a cigar and sat down, taking a puff comfortably. Haha, we killed Bervold in the end. Livia said, it's not over yet. It won't be over until we go back safely. Don't be happy too early. Oni was not bothered. From Neymar to Bervold in the end, the concentrated assassination cases will certainly make the police scratch their heads trying to figure out what the connection is. But in fact, the only connection between these murders is that they are all our masterpieces. But those incompetent policemen must have never thought that the guys we killed were all commissioned by different customers. It's just that the military counselors gathered together and finished it all at once. Livia subconsciously looked at the back of the figure in front of the French window. Song Hauran was overlooking the city of God. Before coming out of the base camp, the military counselor said, after accumulating so many commissions, now that these people are finally in the same place, let's settle them all at once. Only by arranging my time properly can I have enough time to squander. Livia put down the goblet, but Bervold's influence is too great. He is very careful when he goes out. If not for the hostage-taking that made everyone relax, I'm afraid we won't be able to kill him so easily. Oni said disdainfully, Before the hostage-taking began, I had already locked the old man down. That guy is very hard to kill. It's not easy for us to catch him in front of so many people this time. Luvia shook her head and didn't want to say anything more to the arrogant guy. Military counselor, the stations will be strictly checked tomorrow morning. Shall we buy the first train ticket and leave? Evacuating immediately after completing the task and never staying for long was the style of iris flowers. However, Song Hauran suddenly said, I won't go back now. Military counselor? Song Hauran turned around and said with a smile, I want to have another meal before I leave. Luvia was stunned. Military advisor, are you talking about the young Chinese man we met at the theater? Song Hauran said coldly, don't you think he's similar to Dad when he was young? Especially the eyebrows and nose area? He took out the note with the address written on it from his pocket. He narrowed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. Suddenly, he said, let's have lunch. The place is a little small, but it shouldn't be a problem for one night, although it's a little hot. Not only was it small, but it also had a strange smell. However, for an idiot like Livia, who was good at household chores, it was already incredible that he could clean it up to this extent. Caroline could only shake her head. It doesn't matter. I'll just stay for one night. Actually, shouldn't he have agreed to Livia's request? Perhaps it would have been better for him to find a hotel to stay in. He really shouldn't have done it just to save some money. He obviously had a huge sum of money on hand, although he didn't dare to use it recklessly for the time being. Perhaps it was also because of his deep savings? Caroline couldn't help but laugh at herself and then asked Livia, what did you say to your man? Am I talking about Anu? Anu? Anu. Livia rolled his eyes at Caroline and then whispered, I said that you are my colleague. I have something to do early in the morning tomorrow, so I came here to stay for one night. He didn't say anything. Don't worry. However, he doesn't know about us. Don't let it slip. Caroline shook her head and said in a bad mood, Are you an idiot who believes in love? Livia said faintly, Caroline, for people like us, how many times can we have such an opportunity? As for the future, let's talk about it in the future. Livia was the type to live one day at a time. I'm a little sleepy. You go and accompany your Anua. Caroline sighed and hurriedly pushed Livia out of the small utility room. Then, she reminded, I'm really tired at night. When you do things, please be more ladylike. Don't worry about this. After closing the door of the utility room, it immediately turned into an almost sealed and narrow space with only a one-sided window. The summer heat made Caroline sweat a little. The house was an old house, and the soundproofing conditions were not good. Caroline could even hear Livia and her boyfriend Anua talking in the next room. She sighed. The sleeping conditions were obviously very poor. This reminded Caroline of the time when she lived in the repair shop of her adoptive father's house when she was a child. Soon after, Caroline began to hear Livia's familiar and suppressed moans. But didn't these guys know that the bed they were using was making too much noise? Perhaps it was because she was too tired, but even so, she still fell asleep in a daze. In the middle of the night, Caroline woke up from the heat. But at this time, she could no longer hear the voices of Livia and her boyfriend Anua. They must have fallen asleep after finishing their business. Caroline hurriedly opened the door. She planned to take a cold shower and then, perhaps the sofa in the living room with cracked leather would be more comfortable. At least, the living room would not be so hot. When the sun rose, she would leave and send a text message to Livia later. After taking a shower, Caroline sat alone on the sofa and turned on the cool breeze. Gradually, she felt more comfortable. Unknowingly, she fell asleep here. There were dazzling lights, explosive sound systems, and people swaying wildly. Cage, the conductor, looked at the place in a daze. He knew that this was a bar, but he did not expect that Bucky would ask him to come here. If he wanted to hide, shouldn't he find a remote place? But soon, Cage felt that Bucky did not go to the place arranged by Warden Mark and came here for a great purpose. I understand, Boss Bucky. As the saying goes, a great hermit hides in the city. There are so many people here, and those guys won't expect you to be so high profile and dare to come here to visit the nightclub. Am I right? Cage looked at Bucky with admiration. No wonder he was the boss of the Legend of Legends. His courage was really. Bucky glanced at Cage indifferently. Should he tell this idiot that this place was actually one of his properties, but he was using another identity? But Cage's driving skills were really good. Driving such a heavy prison van, he actually got rid of a few police cars. Of course, the prison van had been thrown away somewhere else. Later, Cage bought 2 sets of clothes from a ready-made clothing store. After they changed, they went directly to this place. Strictly speaking, this bar had its own boss, and Bucky was just an investor. As for all the profits of the bar, Bucky had never taken a penny from it all these years. Flaming Red Lips. Cage patted his head. I remember, Flaming Red Lips. Isn't this the famous bar on 9th Avenue? It's rumored that the boss of Flaming Red Lips Bar is a great beauty. Unfortunately, she's a rose with thorns. I've never heard of anyone being able to win her heart. According to the gossip, a famous football player bought 3 carts of red roses and sent them to the door of this bar. He just wanted to have a meal with this beautiful boss, but he was rejected. Cage, you stay here. If I don't come, you don't need to come out. Bucky directly took Cage to a private room. After that, Bucky directly walked into the bar's no-go zone. Generally speaking, this was the office area, which was the basement of the bar. He passed through a long corridor and then came to a door. In front of the door stood 2 strong men wearing wrestling masks. They were only wearing a pair of leather pants and were like iron towers. When Bucky arrived, their eyes only moved a little. In any case, I'm the investor here, Bucky muttered in a low voice. The 2 muscular men in front of him shifted their gazes again, as if they were treating Bucky as heir. Is Lucifer here? I have something to talk to her about. Bucky had to ask helplessly. Her Majesty the Queen is resting. She doesn't see outsiders, one of the strong men said indifferently. Anyway, I'm also the investor here. Her Majesty the Queen is resting. She doesn't see outsiders. The same answer came from the mouth of the other strong man. Bucky swallowed his saliva. He had seen one of these 2 guys directly twist the head of a South American lion, so he couldn't help but say weakly, "Then I'll wait for her to rest." The 2 strong men directly closed their eyes and didn't look at Bucky. Bucky simply leaned against the wall next to him, taking it as a rest. He looked at the door guarded by the 2 strong men. He didn't know why, but every time he saw this door, Bucky had a feeling of fear from the bottom of his heart, and felt a chill run down his spine. This door was completely black, with countless reliefs in the shape of demons. It was like the gate to hell. Lucifer, a woman with a very mysterious origin. Bucky asked himself, in his life, he had never seen any woman like Lucifer, who seemed to be able to arouse all the desires in the depths of a man's heart. With just one look, she could make a man completely crazy. She was like a true walking witch, a witch who would never age. At least, since Bucky met her 20 years ago, she had maintained her youthful appearance. Bucky really didn't know what kind of origin Lucifer had. He only knew that there were 2 kinds of employees in this Flaming Hot Lips bar. One was the ones who greeted the guests in the bar and were invited from outside. The other was brought by Lucifer herself, and each of these people would call her Her Majesty the Queen. For various reasons, Bucky and Lucifer had reached a special relationship. He provided funds for all Lucifer's activities, and Lucifer solved many things for him. Bucky was well aware of how much weight he had. The rumors about the legendary bad guy, many sensational big events in the past, and many high-risk missions in the Imperial Capital headquarters were actually completed with the help of Lucifer's power click. The memory was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Bucky quickly looked over and saw a coquettish woman in a black dress. The woman's skin was pale and bloodless, as white as a patient's. Her long wavy hair hung down to her waist. Her face was slightly rosy, which seemed to be some kind of lingering charm, which added a unique charm to her. But Bucky didn't dare to look at her too much. He knew that this woman was Lucifer's assistant and the woman who was most favored by Lucifer. Yes, favored. Lucifer had never concealed the fact that she was a lesbian in front of him. The so-called rest probably meant that he was doing something that he liked to see and hear, right? Miss Charlotte, long time no see. Bucky bowed his head and shouted. He didn't dare to look at this woman. This was the most favored guy of the Queen. Indeed, long time no see, little Bucky. The woman smiled softly, like rippling lake water, which could make people feel numb. However, even so, Lucifer in the room was much more powerful than Charlotte. This attraction didn't make Bucky confused. I want to see Lucifer. Bucky took a deep breath and said, as usual. Charlotte nodded. Bucky shrugged. At this time, the two muscular men guarding the door took a black ribbon and tied it to Bucky's eyes, blocking all his sight. After that, Bucky touched the door and followed Charlotte into the room. A unique fragrance filled the room. Bucky walked forward about 10 steps and stopped. 10 steps was the limit. He knew deeply that the woman named Lucifer actually hated the approach of men. The two muscular men guarding the door were so majestic, but in fact they were born castrated. Bucky, what's the matter? Aren't you doing well in prison? Are you ready to be drunk until the end? The voice seemed to sound from the bottom of his heart. Even if he couldn't see it, Bucky had an impulse to tear the black ribbon on his face and then jump on it. If he didn't have a special contractual relationship with this woman, he was afraid that he would have already done it. Bucky took a deep breath and said slowly, Lucifer, how many wishes do I have left here? A total of 3 wishes. You have used one of the real wishes. The woman's voice sounded again, as if she was smiling. Little Bucky, are you finally willing to use the second wish? Bucky shook his head. No, I just want to confirm it. You know, every time I want to confirm it. Because I'm afraid that if I don't confirm it, maybe you will swallow me unknowingly. Then why are you looking for me? Lucifer, there's something I'd like to ask, Lucifer said. Bucky said, have you ever seen a blue drug? After injection, it will make people's bodies mutate. Even their blood will turn blue, and their muscles will swell as if they don't feel pain? Where did you see this kind of thing? At this time, it was Charlotte who spoke. Bucky didn't hide anything. He just told her what happened in the theater earlier, and once again focused on describing Roger's appearance when he mutated. After listening, the room was silent for a while. Finally, Charlotte's voice sounded. This should be a new kind of drug called Heaven's Tears, or a new kind of drug that has begun to appear in some rich circles in recent years. But according to your description of Roger, I'm afraid he used the purest kind of Heaven's Tears. It's a pity that he was killed. Otherwise, he would know how much it could improve his physical strength. The guy who shot him really didn't know how to play Ghost. Such a dangerous thing, of course, it's better to kill it directly. Thinking of Roger's terrifying appearance at that time, Bucky still had a lingering fear. At this time, Bucky began to talk again. Time passed by little. About half an hour later, he left the room. As for what he said to Lucifer, only the person involved could know. After the black door full of reliefs slowly closed, Charlotte walked on the black fluffy carpet and came to a huge sofa. On the sofa, a woman wearing a thin gauze dress was lazily lying on the sofa, holding a long tobacco pipe in her hand and slowly smoking. Charlotte knelt in front of the sofa, then leaned into the woman's arms and closed her eyes, as quiet as a house cat. It's getting more and more boring to stay in the human world. Are we going back to the demon realm? Charlotte murmured. Go back for what? The woman smoking the long pipe. Lucifer reached out and stroked Charlotte's creamy skin. Charlotte murmured again, but this is the city of God under the eyes of God. It's blind. Lucifer lowered his head and kissed Charlotte's lips directly. Their tongues were wet and sticky. Chapter 797. Panting. It was as if his ears had been covered, but through the resonance of his skull, he could clearly hear the sound of his breathing with all his might. There was also the sound of her heartbeat. It was dark all around. She didn't know if it was dawn or after sunset. She was running, looking back from time to time with a panicked expression. She was barefoot, but the ground wasn't soft. There was no green grass because it was mud and even uneven. She looked back again, and there seemed to be something terrifying chasing after her. Later, she fell to the ground, but she immediately got up. She couldn't care less about her injured knee, and continued to run while panting. Finally, she seemed to have crashed into something soft, warm, and gentle. "Don't be afraid, Caroline. Dad, a dog, a very fierce dog, is chasing me. Don't be afraid, Caroline, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." She took a deep breath. Her pupils, which were as beautiful as paint patterns blooming in water, suddenly appeared, breaking through all the darkness. The first thing Caroline saw was the slowly rotating blades of the ceiling fan. Her whole body was wet. She didn't know when she had sweated, but she felt uncomfortable all over. The sunlight shone in from the outside, and it was a little dazzling. She should still be lying on the sofa in the living room of Livia's boyfriend, Arnold. Caroline closed her eyes again to clear her mind. It seemed that she had overslept. She had planned to leave early in the morning. Caroline opened her eyes again, and felt much more comfortable. At the same time, she felt that the hand hanging under the sofa seemed to be holding something. She subconsciously let go of her hand, and then she heard a clanging sound. It seemed to be metal? Caroline tilted her head and looked under the sofa. Her vision went from blurry to clear. Then she saw a knife. To be exact, it was a small knife used to peel fruit. There was a bright red color at the front of the silver blade. It was easy to imagine that the color attached to the blade would be blood. A few seconds later, Caroline, who seemed to realize something, suddenly sat up, stood up, and tried to call Livia's name. "Livia? Livia? Livia?" She tried to look in the direction of Livia and her boyfriend's room, but at that moment, she saw Livia sitting at the dining table. She sat facing the chair, her chin resting on the back, and looked at Caroline with wide eyes. Her hands hung down naturally, and there was a large dark red puddle on the floor under the chair. Caroline could even see the blood flowing down the white plastic chair leg. "Livia!" Caroline rushed to the front of the chair and patted Livia's shoulder with her trembling hands in fear, as if she was trying to wake Livia up, so that she could tell her that it was just a joke. His body was so stiff and even a little cold. It didn't have the softness of a woman's skin. "Ah!" Caroline shrieked in horror. Corpses, blood, blood-stained sabers. In an instant, Caroline seemed to realize something. This room was terrifyingly quiet at this moment. Clearly, there was one person missing. Livia's boyfriend, the man who was in college, Anu. "Calm down, calm down, calm down." Caroline forced herself to calm down. She tried to recall what happened last night. Last night, because the small room was too hot, she sneaked out in the middle of the night. After taking a cold shower, she lay down on the sofa in the living room. Then, she fell asleep without realizing it, until she woke up. Then, she held the blood-stained saber in her hand. Livia was dead and Anua was missing. Since she was asleep, she naturally couldn't do anything. So, it was Anua? He killed Livia and left in a hurry. Out of fear, he even stuffed the murder weapon in her hand, trying to frame her? But why did Anua want to kill Livia? Caroline couldn't figure it out. She couldn't figure it out at all. At that moment, her mind was in a mess. She didn't know what to do. Perhaps calling the police was the right thing to do at this time? She instinctively thought that she needed to find some people who could help her. Mobile phone. She returned to the sofa and looked for her mobile phone. At the same time, she saw her bag on the other side of the coffee table. Caroline suddenly had a bad feeling. She immediately picked up her bag and quickly searched through it. Nothing. She even poured out all the things in the bag. Makeup, mirror, lipstick, keys, tissues. A lot of things were scattered on the ground. Caroline even shook the empty bag vigorously, but still nothing. That bank card. The bathroom, nothing. The utility room that she stayed in last night. Nothing. Anua's room, nothing. Everywhere, everywhere, she searched the house like a madwoman, everything in sight. Nothing. Nothing. Caroline knelt on the ground weakly. What should I do? What should I do? At this moment there was a knock on the door, followed by a woman's voice. What happened? Is anyone here? There was a continuous knock on the door. The frightened Caroline quickly rushed to the door. Through the hole in the door, she saw a middle-aged woman with a bag of garbage in her hand. She seemed to be a resident of this building. Is anyone here? I just heard a scream. Hey! Is anyone here? Caroline instinctively called out, but her voice was not loud. She immediately covered her mouth. Asking this woman for help? Obviously, it was not realistic. Anua, you're back? The woman outside the door suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the stairs. Caroline listened to the woman outside the door, and her face changed slightly. She once again put her pupils close to the hole, and at the same time, she vaguely heard a man's voice. Was it Anua? Good morning, Mrs. Riley. I just came back from the university. Did something happen? The middle-aged woman. Mrs. Riley smiled and said, Staying up all night at school again? You're too diligent, but you have to pay attention to your health. I know, but there is an important exam recently, so I have to work harder. Good girl. You haven't had breakfast yet, right? Do you want to come to my house to eat? Mrs. Riley smiled. Caroline still couldn't see the appearance of the man who spoke, but this voice, even if it was a little unclear through the door, she could still barely recognize it. It seemed to be Anua's voice. Last night, she and Anua met last night, but they didn't talk much. Well, I'll have to trouble you again today, Mrs. Riley. By the way, let me put the things away first. Oh, by the way, why are you standing in front of my house? Oh, it's like this. When I just went downstairs to take out the garbage, I suddenly heard a scream coming from your house. It was a woman. Mrs. Riley winked and said, Anua, is that your girlfriend? Don't hide it. When have I ever seen a beautiful woman come out of your house? Introduce her to me. Where did my girlfriend come from? Mrs. Riley, don't talk nonsense. The man's face changed imperceptibly, and then he immediately said, I'm focusing on my studies now. With that, he took out the key and faced the door. Wearing a cap, he was opening the door with his head down, and only his chin could be seen. Caroline finally couldn't see the man's face. Although he had been in the room last night, she only saw him once or twice, but he had the key to open the door, so it was Anua. But the moment the key was inserted into the keyhole, time seemed to slow down. Caroline's eyes were wide open, and her heart was beating fast. This man killed someone, then went out and came back, pretending that she was the murderer. Once they opened the door and saw this scene, how should she defend herself? Mrs. Riley, wait for me, I'll be right back. Anua opened the door of the house while talking. The house was so small that they could see everything as soon as they opened the door. Anua suddenly froze and didn't understand. Mrs. Riley felt very strange, so she asked, Anua? Anua turned around stiffly, and his face was frightened. Mrs. Riley, I think we're going to call the police. Someone died in my house. What? Mrs. Riley was shocked and quickly squeezed into the house. The first thing she saw was the dead woman sitting on the stool. Livia. Mrs. Riley was so scared that she couldn't even hold the garbage bag in her hand. However, at this time, Anua rushed to the balcony and shouted, Someone jumped off the building. Mrs. Riley hurried over and looked out from the balcony. This house was not high, and this was only the second floor. Mrs. Riley just saw a figure running away. It's a woman, they said in unison. It was a seaside house with only 2 floors, but the price was obviously not cheap. This was an apartment for vacationers. The house number was right. Song Howren tidied up his clothes, which was the most basic quality of a gentleman. At the same time, he was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. After pressing the doorbell, Song Howren waited quietly. The salty sea breeze blew, which was obviously not very comfortable in such a hot day. But he didn't sweat and looked very calm. Soon after, the door of the apartment opened. Song Howren showed a bright smile. "Hello, Yu-yi. We meet again." The servant girl, who was simply dressed in casual clothes, showed a surprised expression. Her surprised expression made Song Howren feel a little proud. He actually knew that he had a bad taste. For example, he liked to see other people's surprised expressions. "Mr. Song, it's you? Is Luochio in?" Song Howren smiled. "I'm here at your invitation. You didn't forget that you said you would treat me to a meal, right?" "Of course not." Yu-yi hurriedly greeted Song Howren and walked into the apartment. Song Howren handed out the flowers in his hand and smiled. "This is for you. Platycodon flowers, sincere and unchanging love. I hope you like it." "Thank you." Yu-yi was slightly stunned, and then smiled and took it from Song Howren's hand. "Who's here?" A figure came out of the kitchen at this time. It was the new boss of a club. The boss was still wearing an apron and holding a long wooden spoon for seasoning. "Mr. Song." Luochio was also very surprised. He put down the things in his hand, untied his apron and walked out. "It's really you." Song Howren moved his nose. He smelled some food and said happily, "It seems that I came at the right time. Didn't you say you would treat me to a meal?" He blinked his eyes as if he was joking. "Did you forget? How could that be?" "You're welcome." Luochio smiled calmly but said helplessly, "It's a pity that I didn't prepare braised meatballs today." "It's okay." Song Howren joked. "If you prepared this dish today, I would be surprised." Song Howren walked into the house. Yu-yi quickly served tea. Luochio went into the kitchen and turned off the heat of the seafood soup. Luochio sat down and looked at Song Howren. "Mr. Song, I'm relieved to see that you are safe. I have been paying attention to the news last night, but the report was not very detailed. I heard that there was a very fierce fight later? Some people did die." Song Howren said in a relaxed tone, "But in this country, it's not rare to see people die." He looked at a picture book on the coffee table and took it curiously. He flipped through a few pages and found that it was a colorful picture book that introduced the world's ancient creatures. There were some rare animals and plants on it. Song Howren suddenly said, "You like this kind of thing?" Luochio said casually, "I'm actually a paleontology student. Last time in the restaurant, I heard Mr. Song mention a strange black python in your adventure story. I was a little curious, so I wanted to investigate and see if I could find any clues." "You still remember that story?" Song Howren smiled and blinked. "Actually, I made it up." Boss Luo just smiled and did not say anything. At this time, Yu-yi put on the apron that the boss took off and walked into the kitchen, planning to take over the dishes. Song Howren glanced at her and said with a smile, "This daughter-in-law is not bad." Luochio suddenly said, "Please wait a moment." Under Song Howren's curious gaze, Luochio went upstairs. Not long after, he came down with a box. He walked before Song Howren and opened the box. Then, he said seriously, "Mr. Song, I think I should return this to you." Song Howren found it interesting. He took out the item from the box and fiddled with it a few times. It was one of the items he obtained from the gangsters in the theater last night. A pistol. Song Howren skillfully opened the magazine and casually glanced at it. Then, he suddenly looked at Luochio and asked, "You don't need a single bullet?" Luochio shook his head. "I don't need this kind of thing." Song Howren, however, said, "This is a good thing." After saying that, Song Howren seemed to have thought of something and he suddenly said, "Luochio, I actually came here to show you something. Let's wait and see." Song Howren took out his mobile phone and opened the screen. Then, he opened the photo album. Finally, he placed the mobile phone before Luochio and said indifferently, "This person, Do you have any impression of him? There was a yellowed photo stored in the mobile phone's photo album. Due to the age of the photo, there were many white spots on the black and white photo. The photo had faded and one could barely make out the outline of the person in the photo. Chapter 798. Song Hauran probably wanted to see something from Luocchio's eyes. But to his disappointment, Luocchio looked at the old photo on his mobile phone without any special expression. Instead, he asked curiously, "Mr. Song, do you want me to help you inquire about the person in the photo after I return to China?" Song Hauran was taken aback for a moment. Then, he smiled and said, "That's right. The more people there are, the more effort there is. Even if there are so many people, we have to give it a try." He didn't think that Luocchio would have such an idea. At first, he even planned to take the opportunity to investigate Luoccio's background if he could read something he needed from Luoccio's expression. He had a strange feeling of closeness to this young man. It was a kind of touch that he couldn't explain. It was just that since he got the Sun God's badge, his senses, intuition, and so on had been strengthened. In short, it was the sixth sense. Thinking about it, maybe a few days ago, he walked into the flower shop and met Luocchio on that street. Maybe it was because of his sixth sense. But it seemed that even with this increasingly accurate sixth sense, there were still times when it was wrong. Although he had observed several times and could indeed see some similarities between Luocchio and his father, the world's population was large. Even if there were no inherited genes, it was possible to find two people who looked similar. Song Hauran couldn't help but feel a little disappointed because of this. His father Song Tianyo's lifelong wish was to find his brother. But this wish was so far away. "I really haven't seen this person, nor have I heard of him before. But..." Boss Luo was silent for a moment and left his seat. "But..." "Please wait a moment." When he came back again, he was also holding a mobile phone in his hand, just like the old photo Song Hauran showed him. Now the two had changed. Song Hauran took Luoccio's mobile phone and looked at a photo archive in the mobile phone's photo album. It was also an old photo, but it was in color and looked very well preserved. In the photo, there was a man wearing a police uniform with spirited eyes. Song Hauran looked at the man's appearance, his lips slightly opened. He is my father, Luochi," Luocchio said slowly. "Mr. Song, do you mind listening to a story?" In an instant, Song Hauran's heart moved slightly, as if he realized something. His expression became extremely serious, no longer the standard playboy look. He even sat up straight, he even swallowed his saliva, and said solemnly, "Please say." "Not long ago, I went back to my hometown to attend a funeral." Luocchio looked at a bunch of sunflowers in front of the apartment's windowsill and said slowly, "It was an old woman in my family. Before she died, she told me that my father was actually adopted." Song Hauran's eyes suddenly jumped, thinking of Luoccio's surname. "But my grandparents have passed away long ago." Luocchio shook his head. "Those who knew the inside story are no longer here, so I can't find out the truth from any normal way." Song Hauran couldn't help but interrupt. "Could it be your father, Mr. Luochi? He didn't know it himself?" Luocchio said softly, "My father died in the line of duty 4 years ago." Song Hauran was like a thunderbolt from Qingtian. His waist suddenly bent down. He took a deep breath, seemed to quickly pull himself together, and then asked expectantly, "Can you tell me your father's story?" "My grandparents told me when I was young that he was a very naughty child." Luocchio smiled and recalled, from a young age, he was the king of the children in the village. He was the only one who could bully others, and the other children couldn't even think about snatching a piece of fruit candy from him. He finished his education in the primary school run by the village. When he was 16, someone from the army came and said that they wanted to recruit. He signed up, but later looked at the recruitment standards and found that his weight didn't pass. Later, he quietly went up the mountain to cut a lot of bananas. According to my grandma, the bananas were not ripe yet, but he ate a lot by himself, and his stomach was full. Later, he went to measure his weight and barely passed. I heard that life in the army was very hard. One winter, my grandma and grandpa saved money and took a train to see it. It was before the new year. Grandpa said that at that time it was snowing and he was on guard duty. He was wearing a dark green military coat with a gun on his back. His lips were white, and his eyebrows were frozen into frost. Grandma said that the first thing he said when they met was that the coat was like a quilt, so it wasn't cold. But my grandpa told me that his legs were actually trembling at that time. Because it was a bitter cold place, he learned to eat spicy food. This habit lasted until he left the army. There used to be some spicy chicken in my house, and he made it himself. When I was young, I didn't understand. When I saw the bright red sauce, my mother told me that it was ketchup. When I said I wanted to eat it, he made a spoon with a smirk and stuffed it directly into my mouth. At this point, Luochu suddenly paused and slowly said, "I think that's probably his biological father." Song Hauran couldn't help but smile. Luochu fell into silence again. After about 10 seconds he continued, "They got married 24 years ago, and I was born 2 years later. 1 year later, I was born." Why did he become a police officer? He told me that it was because police officers were very handsome. Later, I found out that it was because my mother had a special fondness for the police profession. At that time, he had just started working and was poor. He rode a second-hand motorcycle to work every day. Actually, he offended a lot of people. I remember when I was in the 4th grade of primary school, I was caught by a few men at the school gate after school one day. He said that he gradually began to like his profession. He said that when he heard people thanking him, he felt secretly happy. I learned a few moves from him in the army, but he said that I didn't learn it well, and that it wasn't even for show. Later, he took advantage of the summer holidays to give me special treatment and secretly took me to the shooting range. He had a group of good brothers who were willing to go through fire and water with him. My mother passed away early, and he began to come home less often. Then, I don't know when it started, but I had a stepmother. Strictly speaking, she is probably my only family member now. I remember that day when my high school was preparing for the school anniversary, I was inexplicably asked to perform by a group of people. I didn't feel very happy, but it seemed that I could tell him about it. After school, she suddenly appeared in front of me and told me that he had died an hour ago. How did that happen? We just had dinner together last night. That smell. I still remember it. Luochu looked at the pot of sunflowers in front of the window sill and gradually became absent-minded. He didn't continue to speak for a long time. "Your father, what happened to him?" Song Hauran hesitated for a moment, but still broke the silence. "I heard that a group of criminals from other provinces came to commit crimes. They also had a lot of weapons and robbed the car. Later, when they were fighting on the road, he was shot in the heart while protecting a colleague." Luochu's voice returned to normal. "What about the group of robbers?" Song Hauran squinted his eyes. "Do you know their names?" Luochu shook his head and said, "They are either dead or captured. I heard that the last one died of illness in prison a few years ago. As for his name, I have already forgotten it." "Is that so?" Song Hauran nodded his head. He couldn't tell what was going on. He just put his mobile phone together with Luochu's mobile phone. The 2 different old photos were like 2 different times intersecting at this moment. Luochu suddenly said, "I have never met this Mr. Song Tianyin. However, I have always been watching my father." Song Hauran took a deep breath and said, "Perhaps we can give it a try? If it's just a test, it will be quick, don't worry, I will pay for it." Luochu asked, "Mr. Song, don't you think this is too much of a coincidence?" Song Hauran smiled and said, "There are many mysterious things in this world, let alone a coincidence like this. There are 7 billion people in this world. There are bound to be some who have won the lottery. He took another deep breath and said seriously, "Perhaps this is a miracle." Song Howren didn't eat later. He left in a hurry, but there was a sealed bag with a strand of hair in his hand. Don't you want to eat? I still have a lot of dishes to prepare." Looking at Song Howren's back in a hurry, the servant girl, wearing gloves, just took out a plate of barbecued meat from the oven. Boss Luo smiled at this time, walked forward and said with a smile, "I should be able to finish it." "Please wait a moment," Yu Yi suddenly said. "Can I put in the flowers sent by Mr. Song first, master?" "Yes, go ahead." Luochu didn't care. On the road, the black off-road vehicle was running fast. Song Howren, who was controlling the steering wheel with one hand, turned on his mobile phone and started an encrypted communication. "I'm on my way to the hospital. Don't worry, you will know the result tonight." Song Howren didn't get excited as Song Howren expected. Instead, he was silent for a long time. After a long time, his father slowly said, "Howren, don't you feel that things are going too smoothly?" Song Howren frowned. "Dad, what do you mean?" Song Tianyu said, "I have been looking for your uncle for decades, but I haven't heard from him. But now you tell me that your uncle's descendant came here for a trip and you met him. If you were me, what would you think? Howren, I know you have always wanted to help me fulfill this long-cherished wish, but this is not your style. You shouldn't have contacted him directly. Even if you want to collect samples for testing, we have many ways to do so." Song Howren was startled. He parked the car by the roadside and pondered, recalling what happened in the past few days. His logical thinking told him that such a coincidence shouldn't exist. It seemed that there was a mysterious force pushing his actions, making him unconsciously. Song Howren subconsciously touched the sun god's badge on his body. After getting this thing, he didn't tell anyone, not even his father. "I don't know why, but when I saw him for the first time, I had an indescribable feeling," Song Howren said slowly. "In the beginning, I only saw a trace of your father's shadow between his eyebrows, and it gave me a special feeling. Later, after more contact, this feeling became clearer and clearer. It's hard for me to describe it to you, but it's a very intimate feeling. Although this matter is a bit urgent, it may not be a bad thing. I have a hunch, maybe. He is the relative we have been looking for." "Your premonition?" Song Tianyu asked solemnly. "Well, it's that kind of hunch," Song Howren quickly responded. No one knew that he got the sun god's badge in that dangerous adventure, but in the iris flower, everyone knew that Song Howren's hunch was particularly accurate. They all thought that it was the talent of the son of the iris flower, a kind of extraordinary thing that couldn't be described as too mysterious. "Since it's that kind of hunch," Song Tianyu took a deep breath, "then I'll leave it to you. If he is really the descendant of the big brother I'm looking for, you have to bring him to me by any means." "Okay, I'll give you the result tonight." Song Howren hung up the phone. Thousands of miles away, in the base camp of the iris flower, there was a valley that was full of changes. Surrounded by green hills, birds chirping and flowers fragrant, there was also a dense white fog in the mountain stream, like a fairyland on earth. In terms of feng shui, this was a rare treasure land. In this valley there was a complex and huge building complex. Halfway up the mountain there was a white villa. Song Tianyu was already 60 years old, but his body was still strong. It was just that in his early years, there were many hidden injuries, so he couldn't help but cough a little. At this time, he was looking at the whole valley with white hair, murmuring, "Brother Tianyin, bless me, I can really find him." Song Tianyu closed his eyes. After a long time, he took a deep breath and picked up the phone again. This time, he made an international long-distance call. "Song family's little brat? Why did you suddenly think of calling me?" this old woman. It was the voice of an old woman. "Sisterly, long time no see, how are you?" Song Tianyu's tone was respectful. "Not good, I fell a while ago." Sigh, old people are brittle. Until now, I still can't get well. I have to be taken care of by my granddaughter every day. My body is getting worse and worse recently. Song Tianyu sympathized with her. I don't know when I can see you again. Don't come, you are blacklisted in the country. How can I let you enter so easily? Say it, you don't come to the temple without a reason. You haven't looked for me for a long time. You must have something to tell me, right? Haha, Sister Li is indeed a pure heart. Your heart is clear. Don't laugh at this old woman. Sister Li, in my heart, you are still that beautiful Miss Lan Fong from back then. Even if you are old, you are still as luxurious. Back then? I am old enough to be your mother. If you have something to fart, just say it. My granddaughter wants to read to me. Sister Li, I want to ask you to help me with something. Song Tianyu could only say, you know it is not convenient for me to go back, so I want you to use your connections to help me inquire about a person's information. Oh? What new clues did you find this time? How many times has it been? Little brat Song, you still haven't given up? This time, maybe it is different, Sister Li. Can you help me? Song Tianyu said respectfully. Recently, my people discovered some Incan culture. If it is convenient, I will ask someone to send some to you. No need, I just want to inquire about some information. I don't need your filial piety. That year when I walked out of the capital as a widow, if it wasn't for your Song family protecting me, I might have lost my life. Give me the name, I will give you the information tomorrow. Wait at night. Oh, I am afraid it will be morning in your country. I will tell you then. I am still waiting. The old woman kept silent for a while, then said slowly, you are too impatient. I have to be impatient. Okay, I will wait for your call. Thank you, Sister Li. Grandma, who is calling you? It is so late. Zhang Qingrui brought a bowl of bird's nest porridge, coming to Zhang Lilanfang's window. Madame Dowager gently shook her head and sighed, an old friend, also the descendant of our Zhang family's benefactor. Benefactor? Zhang Qingrui took off her nightgown, sitting down and asking curiously, why haven't I heard that we have a benefactor? It happened a long time ago. Zhang Lilanfang recalled. At that time, your father was still an infant, so he didn't know much about it. What kind of person is he? Zhang Qingrui was more curious. A ruffian. Zhang Lilanfang touched Zhang Qingrui's hair. Later, he became a local warlord. But he didn't get through the most turbulent period. Song family has been gone for a long time. Only one descendant left, who went overseas to develop. Yen PS1. About the paternity test, I specially checked it. It seems that the result can be expedited in a few hours. I don't know if it is correct. Chapter 799. The police car was parked in front of an old building. Of course, the two police officers who drove the car were no longer there. They were now in a unit on the second floor of the building, accompanied by several forensic officers. There was no doubt that this was a murder case. According to common sense, there should be at least several times more people at the scene of this kind of murder. But obviously, there were more forensic officers searching for evidence than maintaining order and looking for clues. The so-called maintaining order was actually just setting up a cordon downstairs, and no one was guarding it. The reason for this was not the slacking or inaction of the police officers in charge of maintaining order in the city, even though the city had always been known for its poor security. The truth was that not only had there been a major hostage-taking incident last night, even the president of the Senate had been assassinated on his way home. At the same time, the local chief Jose was also shot by bandits in the theater. Now the whole police system was in chaos, and a large number of people were transferred. Due to all kinds of reasons, only 2 police officers arrived at the scene in the end. Mrs. Riley, please repeat. You are the owner of this house, right? A police officer was holding a recording pen to Mrs. Riley. Mrs. Riley said, Yes, this house was left to me by my husband, and there are currently 4 tenants. On the other side, the second police officer was questioning Arnold, the tenant of the unit where the murder happened. Of course, the questioning here was much more detailed. The police officer not only turned on the recording pen, but also took a small notebook to write down important clues. "Are you sure you don't know the victim?" the police officer asked. "No, I have never seen this woman." Arnold shook his head. The police officer snorted. "You said you don't know the victim, then why was she in your house? We have checked the door, and there is no trace of damage. Although this place is not high, you can climb in from the outside. Let's assume that this woman is a thief. But in your house, the most valuable thing should be the only air conditioner in your bedroom, right?" "Officer, listen to me, I really don't know this woman, and I don't know how she got in my house," Arnold hurriedly said. "I was at school the whole night and only left this morning. The guard can testify for me." "Did I ask you that?" the police officer snorted. "Why are you in such a hurry to explain?" Anua swallowed his saliva and subconsciously adjusted his black-rimmed glasses, not daring to speak. From the outside, Anua did not look like the kind of college student with a flying personality who could keep up with trends. Instead, he looked more like a bookworm. At this time, the communicator on the officer's shoulder rang. After listening for a while, he looked at Anua and said, "Through the ID card left by the deceased, we found the personal information of the deceased. Who do you think this woman is?" Arnold asked curiously, "Who are they?" "Her name is Livia. She used to be a police officer and had experience of being arrested. I think she should still be in that profession now." The police officer stared into Arnold's eyes and suddenly asked, "Sir, do you have a habit of soliciting prostitutes?" Anua was stunned, and then he said with a rather agitated expression, "What do you mean? Are you suspecting that I killed someone?" At that time, Mrs. Riley was also there. "We all saw with our own eyes that someone climbed down from my house and ran away. It was a woman." "Quiet," the police officer snorted. "You just need to answer my questions. You don't need to say anything else. Answer me, do you have a habit of soliciting prostitutes?" Perhaps because the police officer's momentum was too strong, Anua's face turned pale and he hurriedly said, "No." At this time, another police officer who was taking a statement with Mrs. Riley came over, and the two began to talk in a low voice. Then the police officer looked at Anua and narrowed his eyes. "You said that you didn't know the deceased? Then why did your landlord, Mrs. Riley, tell me that she saw a woman walk out of your house several times?" "Impossible." Anua shook his head. "I really don't know this woman, is that so?" the police officer sneered. "In fact, it's very simple to prove whether this woman has been here before or not. There are surveillance videos in the nearby streets, and we can investigate the previous records. At the same time, there are many shops downstairs. With so many people, if this woman has really been here several times, she will definitely find someone who has an impression of her. Don't you think so?" Anua's face changed slightly. "You're lying," the police officer shouted coldly. Anua's face turned pale and he hesitated. "Officer, I do have something to hide, but can we speak in private?" The two police officers exchanged a look and brought Anua out. "Well, if you're smart, you should know that you have to tell us the truth." "Officer, I swear, I really don't know this woman." Anua swallowed and then hesitated. "But I think I might know why she appeared in my house." "You don't know her? How can you know?" The police officer was furious. "Boy, are you playing with us?" Anua quickly shook his hands. No, please listen to me. I actually have a brother. Maybe he knows this woman?" "Your brother?" The two police officers frowned. Anua sighed and said, "Yes, my brother. We're twins. It's true. You should be able to find the records about this. My brother's name is Haley." The police officers quickly investigated. With the information provided by Anua, Haley's information was quickly verified. Looking at the simple information about Haley on the phone, as well as Haley's ID photo sent by the headquarters, the police officers compared it to Anua's current appearance and frowned. They really are twins. You mean this victim was brought back by your brother? Maybe I'm just guessing. Anua sighed and said, I don't have a good relationship with my brother. The last time he came to my house was 2 months ago. But something strange happened at that time, and that was that a spare key to my house was missing. I didn't think much of it at that time, but now that I think about it, my brother must have secretly taken it. The police officer was puzzled. Even if he took it, why did he bring this woman here? Also, why did you and Mrs. Riley see another woman run away? Anua shook his head. How would I know? I've already told you, I just came back from school early in the morning. I don't know what happened here. But what? The police officer asked. Anua frowned and said, after hearing about the victim's identity, I remembered what happened in the past. Back when my parents were still alive, our family of 4 was still living here. My brother, Haley, was already very fond of finding prostitutes back then. He would even bring them back home to save on the cost of the hourly room. The victim happened to be a prostitute, so I have reason to believe that Haley secretly brought her here to do those things when I wasn't home. The police officer snorted and said, Since you have such an important clue, why didn't you tell us at the beginning? Instead, you waited until we found out that you were lying to us before telling us the truth? Anua seemed to have been forced into a corner. He grabbed his hair painfully and squatted on the ground. Because I didn't want anyone to know that I had such a brother. Officer, since you found his information, you should know what kind of person my brother, Haley, is, right? Theft, drug abuse, fighting, assault, illegal traffic jams, jail time. I think the file on him should be as thick as a dictionary. What about me? Since I was young, I studied very hard and my grades were excellent. Later, I tried my best to get into this famous university. In other people's eyes, I was a person with a bright future. I didn't want anyone to know that I had such a twin brother. It seemed that he could not control his emotions. At this time, Arnold suddenly raised his head and roared, Can you understand that feeling? In this world, there is a person who looks exactly like you, but does all kinds of bad things. Every day, who knew how many people hated this face behind his back? Every day, who knew how many people were looking for this face to seek revenge? You? Can you understand that kind of fear? Can you understand the hatred in my heart? Recently, because of my good grades, the faculty gave me an extra scholarship. My tutor also recommended a very good internship company for me. Anua took off his glasses and covered his eyes. He sounded like he was about to cry. If others knew that Haley was my brother and that he might be related to the murder case, then my efforts all this time, his shoulders trembled. This young man in his early 20s squatted in front of the 2 police officers and cried silently. The police officer who questioned Anua shook his head and took out a pack of tissues. He patted Anua's shoulder and said, Okay, about what you said, we will seriously verify it when we go back. Of course, it's also true that you didn't cooperate with us in the beginning. But, forget it, we won't pursue this matter for the time being. Then, do you know your brother? I mean Haley, do you know where he is? Or how to find him? Another police officer asked. Anua wiped his eyes and put his glasses back on. He shook his head and said, I don't know where he is. All this time, he was the one who took the initiative to find me. Sometimes, even when I was hiding from him, he could always find me. To be honest, for a person like him, where could he not stay? Today, he's at this woman's house. Tomorrow, he'll be at another woman's house. Maybe the day after tomorrow, he'll be in prison. The police officer took notes and asked, When was the last time he came to find you? You said 2 months ago. Do you remember the exact time? Did he say anything to you at that time? Did he mention anyone? It should be late October, around the 25th or 26th. Anua frowned. I don't remember what he said. At that time, I didn't want to talk to this guy at all. I was just brushing him off. That's it? Try to remember everything in detail, the police officer continued to ask. Anur rubbed his forehead and said hesitantly, "Oh right, he said that day that he would have money in 2 days. When that time comes, he would buy me a big house." Anur shook his head and sneered. "How can a person like him have money? Even if he does, I'm afraid he wouldn't know where he got it from. I don't want that kind of money." The 2 police officers continued to ask Anur a lot of questions and then told him to keep in touch and that they could find him at any time. They didn't leave until it was almost evening. Mrs. Riley didn't know what the police officers said after they took Anur away. She asked with concern, "Anur, are you okay? They didn't do anything to you, did they? Don't be silent. If they bullied you, I'll sue them. They're a bunch of freeloaders. They only know how to bully us." No, they just asked me some details." Anur shook his head and comforted her. "They were very polite to me. They were just curious why the deceased could come in." "That's right. How did these 2 women get in here? It's really strange." Mrs. Riley suddenly looked at Anur strangely. You really don't know?" Anur smiled bitterly. "If I knew, I wouldn't have such a headache. Now they've blocked the scene. I don't even know where to stay today." Mrs. Riley nodded and suddenly said, "It's a pity that the sewer pipe in my house cracked today. It smells so bad. Otherwise, you would have been able to stay a few nights. How about you stay outside for a while? It doesn't matter. I can reimburse you." "No, I'll go back to school. There's a place for me to rest." Seeing that Mrs. Riley suddenly distanced herself from him, Anur didn't say anything. He lowered his head and said, I'll go back to school first." Well, be careful." Mrs. Riley nodded and didn't ask him to stay. "Sir, do we really believe this guy's words?" In the police car that was far away, a conversation between 2 police officers began. "There's nothing to believe or not to believe." The one who was asked said casually, "Let's go to the Great Learning Center and then check the details of Hailey. In addition, the deceased's mobile phone is still here. Let's go back and unlock it. Let's check the last communication record. Let's get the results as soon as possible. Then we'll follow the script." "Okay." His companion didn't say anything more. Now the system was in chaos. Several factions had begun to take action, all wanting to grab the vacant position left by Director Jose's death. At this time, the police officer who was asked suddenly said, "There will be, right?" "What?" "There are 2 brothers. The older one is a bad guy and the younger one is a future social elite.